I think we're live on Facebook now. So hello everyone, welcome to this webinar organized by the All African Students Union. Today we'll be discussing on education in emergency situations, particularly with this COVID-19 pandemic at this moment. We want to discuss what are the different responses to this pandemic all across Africa, especially pertaining to students and the educational systems. So we have panelists who will be representing all the different regions of Africa, and we hope that you enjoy this. So we'll start by playing a 2 to 3 minute welcome address from the Secretary General of the All Africa Students Union, Mr. Peter Kwesi Koji. The address should be on in a second.
Hello everyone, I wish to welcome you to today's webinar on mitigation strategies. It's my hope that all are very and the time is overcome. I cannot stop emphasizing the practice social distancing, washing your hands. As a result of the COVID-19, small certification education has been restructured as that is affected. Hello everyone.
All right, I think we're having some issues with the sound on the address. So let's wait for the team to fix that, please. Please pardon us.
Hello everyone. I wish to welcome you to today's webinar on mitigation. It's my hope that all are here to as a result of small education has been restricted. All African students current status quo effect action today it's discuss how to what measures have been the key takeaways are publish to share experiences lastly, to build a modern
Power on. Bluetooth mode. Aux mode.
Hello, everyone. I wish to welcome you to today's webinar on education. Who is affected by it is my hope that we are all adhering to the recommended guidelines to avoid the spread of the COVID-19. I cannot stop emphasizing the need to practice social distancing, washing your hands regularly, and avoiding movement unless it is absolutely necessary. As a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, schools have closed and education has been disrupted in ways that is affecting learning as we know it. The All Africa Students Union is concerned that the current status quo, if left unchecked, will leave a lot of people behind and drastically impact our progress towards attaining the SDG 4 and the other related goals. Today, we will discuss how education has been impacted across the continent so far and what measures are being put in place at the national levels to mitigate the colossal losses if we were to leave things to chance. The key takeaways are to publish a policy brief on the status of education in Africa during the COVID-19 pandemic, to share experiences of what our national unions are doing in response to this pandemic, and lastly, to build a broader coalition of relevant stakeholders to charge policymakers to take the right decisions in these difficult times. I want to use this opportunity to express our heartfelt gratitude to all our national unions who have risen to the challenge and are volunteering in many ways that even put them in harm's way. Nevertheless, they have shown that their concern for the marginalized clearly supersedes the fear that is pushing people to look within. Some of you have distributed food to those who cannot afford. Some of you have tended to the sick. Others still have lobbied their governments and private companies to show a human face in these difficult times. All these efforts, however small, is why we will overcome this deadly virus together. Also, it is important to acknowledge that some African governments are taking extraordinary measures to alleviate the impact of the pandemic on the poor and the marginalized. We commend these efforts and ask all those who are not doing so to follow this example. Let us stay for the full duration of the webinar, and don't forget to send your questions to the speakers to be addressed. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I wish to
All right, so thank you everyone for your patience. Sorry about the technical difficulties that we faced there, but I believe that we're all able to listen to Peter's message, commending efforts so far by governments and student unions in response to this COVID-19 pandemic. So now we'll go straight into a keynote address by Dr. James Kiwi. He will give a 10-minute keynote, and then we'll have about 5 minutes for question and answer. I'll start by introducing Dr. Kiwi to all of you. So Dr. James Kiwi has a doctorate in education and is a policy researcher in the education and training sector. He was appointed to the position of JET Education Services CEO in September 2014. Prior to his appointment at JET, he was the Director for International Liaisons at the South African Qualifications Authority. James is a teacher by profession, having taught at secondary school level and at Teachers College, which was later incorporated into UNISA, University of South Africa. He has conducted and overseen various initiatives related to national, regional, and international qualification frameworks in Africa and further afield. His research into qualifications, the recognition of learning, and the professionalization and migration of teachers has been published and presented widely. Since taking over at JET, he has worked to consolidate the organization's position as a credible collaborator supporting the improvement of the education and training system in South Africa. His responsibilities include managing and leading the JET Education Systems team and the development of the organization's vision, mission, visibility, and overall strategic direction. So let's all welcome Dr. James Kiwi. Thank you very much for agreeing to give us this keynote address this morning. You may proceed. Thank you.
Thank you. You're most welcome. It's an opportunity for me to, I suppose, share some interesting ideas and things that are happening in South Africa and Africa. Can I just check, is my sound okay and video okay before I go too far? Sorted. Okay. So what I'm going to share with you, and if you don't mind just loading slides, I've just got 4 or 5 slides. It's not going to take long, but it might help you just in terms of the visuals. Just to share with you a little bit about what we're doing in South Africa when it comes to COVID-19, and in particular using educational research to manage COVID-19 responses in the education sector in a real-time manner. So what I'm going to be sharing with you is a team effort from 150 researchers. Many of them are volunteers, and the majority of them are actually volunteer youth from South Africa that we've asked to be part of this initiative. So just as South Africa went into lockdown, and I'm sure all our countries are at different stages of lockdown, but when South Africa went into lockdown about 2 weeks ago, we put out a call to our youth and asked them who of them would like to be involved in real-time research that can make a difference to how government and the private sector in South Africa can respond to the COVID-19 crisis. We were absolutely overwhelmed. Within 2 days, we had over 300 applications. We shortlisted the applications and we were able to appoint about 120 of these young volunteer researchers. Some of them are university students, like I assume many of you are. Some of them are young practicing teachers, and some are a little bit older. We set an age limit at 35, and so the majority of respondents were under 35. We were then able to appoint, just as I say, just over 100 of these young researchers to work with us. So if you go to my slide, you can see the names actually on the slides. If you can just put it back up, if you don't mind. We used the idea of the Matrix digital rain. I'm sure you guys, if you go to the next slide, please. If you're familiar with the Matrix, I hope it's one of your favorite movies. It's definitely one of mine. But all you see there is the names of the current researchers that are involved in this. We're calling it a boot camp. You can call it many things, but effectively it's a team of researchers that is helping government to respond to the COVID-19 crisis. So if you don't mind going to the next slide, and there are only 5 or 6 slides, so don't be concerned. It's not going to be a long slide presentation. But what I want to show you here, and this is kind of the key things that we're working on at the moment. So I mentioned the researchers. We've got some international peer reviewers, quite a few from Africa. For example, in Addis Ababa, the International Institute for Capacity Building in Africa, ICBA. If you don't know ICBA and you work in education, you need to get to know them. This is a key UN agency based in Addis that is very involved in education across Africa. Of course, IDEA and many other associations are also involved, but ICBA might be one that not everybody knows. So some of our peer reviewers are from those agencies. Also the UN headquarters in Paris. We're working across 12 themes. I'll show you now what the themes are because some of them will be of more interest to you than others. What we're trying to do is follow a real-time approach. So the idea is not to wait for 6 months to come up with these interesting findings, but rather to inform interventions that are assisting schools and colleges and universities during this time. We've already released some findings a couple of days ago, and I'll give you some links to that now, and you can have a look. Why am I sharing all of this with you? I'm sharing with you a good practice study of what's happening in South Africa. It's an example of something that I think is working well and something we would like to share with other African countries. If you want to get involved, you're welcome. If you want to run something similar to this, we can share everything for free. There's no IP around these kind of things. We're trying to help as a non-profit community, as an education community around how we all respond. I think you might agree with me that the trend in Africa is interesting. We're far behind the rest of the world when it comes to the infection rates. So some people might argue that it's not going to happen to us in Africa. Others might argue that this is some kind of the scenario that we're seeing is something that is only first world based and is not going to come to Africa or any of the African countries. Some even argue it's a conspiracy theory and like all of this is just a big makeup. I think we've got to be incredibly careful. We are seeing the trends picking up slower in Africa, and for many reasons. I mean, our ability to test is less than part of the first world. And we must be incredibly careful. And the key thing today that I would like to share with you about is the impact on education. So if you go to the next slide, please. Thank you, Samuel. What you'll see on the next slide is the 12 themes. Now, this might be a bit small for you to see properly. You can try and enlarge your screen, or you can go to the website that I'll give you in a few minutes if you want to see a bit closer. I'm not going to talk about all 12 themes today, But there are a couple of themes here that I think if you are interested in, that you can follow a bit closer and you can even get involved if you want to. One of the themes I would want to lift out to you a little bit, and I think it's one that you need to talk about, is number 7. So theme 7 we're running at the moment is about data and data privacy. We can talk a lot about schools and colleges and helping the disadvantaged. If you just stay on that slide, thanks. But what about data privacy and intellectual property when it comes to all the people that are involved, in particular the disadvantaged? This is a time when governments can take a lot of liberties with rules that would normally apply but might be not be utilized now. So as a youth and as a kind of student union community, this is an area that I would really plead to you to help with. Let's be careful. We need to open up. We need to allow government access to things that maybe before they would not be able to, but let's be careful. Let's not create an environment where we've got a big brother approach across Africa just because the COVID-19 crisis created that opportunity. So that's maybe a bit on the negative side, but let's be careful. Another theme that would be important to you would be theme 8. This is really a higher education response in South Africa, and many of you are in higher education in other African countries. Have a look what's happening there. This is about both online, offline learning, the normal things that we will talk about, but also about protocols and about ways of engaging that allow the disadvantaged to participate as well. Many of the things we do, and even going to be talking about today, are for people that have access to internet, access to data. What about the many, many people, young people around Africa that do not? How do we cater for them? I think it's really important that we look at that. You can see some of the other themes could be of interest to you, so feel free to drop in if that kind of appeals to you. Maybe the last one that I would just emphasize would be the last one, number 12. This is a theme that focuses on innovative finance. So as we work in African countries and we try and support our schools and our colleges and our universities and our education departments, there is funding available. The international community and many donors are ready to assist, but we've got to be incredibly careful here. Firstly, accountability must be the most important thing. This is not a time to just have a free-for-all. And secondly, we need to look at more innovative models. And there's some interesting things happening in education at the moment that we can learn from around public-private partnerships that can move very quickly. Some of them are already being utilized in South Africa for practical health stuff like masks and PPE. But what about if we can utilize some of those funding models for education now? So, for example, we've just lobbied our telecom providers in South Africa to zero rate some of the platforms that we're using at the moment. So you still need internet access, but at least if it's zero rated, it makes it more accessible to many people. If you can go to the next slide, please. So just very briefly, what I'm going to share with you now, just in the remaining 5 minutes or so, would be some of the emerging findings that we're seeing coming through from these 12 themes. 150 researchers, 12 themes running right now. They're running until the 30th of April. So if you're interested, drop in there and see what they're busy with. Or if you want to do something like this in your country, just give us a shout and we can share everything with you that we've developed so far. So if you go to the next slide, please. Yeah, just very briefly, just some insights that we're getting. And some of them might make sense to you. Some of them are quite South African, so just bear with me. This is a South African initiative, not African, but of course it can have benefits to many African countries. One of the first things we see is around parents. We're seeing that parents are, of course, not teachers, but they play an incredibly important role during lockdown. So how do we support our parents to be able to guide the children? I think there's a lot of work around this that is not rocket science, and that can be done around managing the anxiety of kids, but also just guiding parents broadly. In advantaged schools and advantaged communities, schools are already giving guidelines to parents, but of course, we always need to consider what the disadvantaged communities will have and what kind of support they have. Second insight that we're seeing at the moment, NGOs or NPOs or whatever you want to call them, but non-government organizations have a critical important role to play, even more so in Africa and even more so in South Africa. And we're finding that if you can organize NPOs, just like you guys are organized as a student union, what if we can organize nonprofits in a kind of association that they are more coherent, more organized? And there's interesting things happening in South Africa around this. The third one is about data. So I mentioned data earlier, about data privacy. But we're launching a platform on the next day or two that'll be freely available, that'll link NGO activities and education with funding. So what we're trying to do is a bit of a mapping around what activities are happening around COVID-19 responses and where can the funding go. We now have the technology internationally to do this kind of stuff quickly. And so watch this space as we're going to be launching a minimum viable product in the next couple of days. Number 4, culture matters. We must be very careful when we work with communities. It's not a one-size-fits-all. We can't take a South African solution and implement it just like it is in Uganda or in Ethiopia. So I think an awareness around this kind of thing is really important, understanding different cultures and what will be more suitable to different cultures. If you can go to the next slide, please. Just a couple of other inputs, and I'm not going to go through all of them. Number 8, really important in South Africa at the moment. We're really thinking about examinations. So our schooling examination, school leaving certificate is important, and I'm sure all of you in your countries would have the same challenge. We've got to look after our matrics and our school leavers. How do we restructure those exams? But what about university exams? Can university exams also be restructured and to not only be delivered more online, but also to look at the actual delivery and the way that the examinations are structured? So these are discussions in South Africa at the moment. I spoke about number 7, so I'm just backtracking a little bit. Number 5 is really important, is we as educationalists and as researchers can definitely assist government around tracking and tracing when people are infected and how they're being treated, particularly if we utilize schools and colleges and universities. These are sites that can definitely assist government, but we've got to be incredibly careful how we do it. It's not just a free-for-all and a kind of random approach. But in South Africa, we're definitely looking at this. All right, then my second last slide, if you move on one more, please. Just a couple of other insights we're seeing. Number 10, in our case in South Africa, and I'm sure for you guys and in many other countries as well, nutrition is important. Many of our kids are on nutrition schemes in schools in South Africa. And what happens during lockdown, all these kids are back with their parents, and the parents don't have the ability to actually feed the kids themselves. So we're spending a lot of time in South Africa around taking the food into those communities and assisting them right now. I spoke about number 11. Let's look at alternative funding models. Let's think out of the box when we try and fund COVID-19 interventions. Number 12, and this is maybe one that could be of interest to you as well, is what are the metrics to see whether social distancing is actually working? We're hearing and we understand it's important to distance socially, but what does it mean for a school or a university? Clearly, when we start coming back online and some schools and universities start functioning, these are not places where you have a meter or 2 meter space around every individual. So what does that really mean for us and how can we manage it? And then number 13, the last point, what we're seeing, particularly those of you, and I'm hoping there are a couple of you that are teacher education students, maybe doing bachelor's in education or related qualifications. You need to go out into schools and do teaching prac. How can you do teaching prac during this period? And clearly it's going to still last in some way or another for a couple of months. So we are looking at innovative ways of teaching practice that will be rolling out the next couple of months, particularly in South Africa when it comes to teaching practice. Thanks. If you can go to my last slide. So just to summarize then, what I've tried to present to you is an interesting case study of what's happening in an African country, in South Africa in particular. It's got a very South African focus, so I'm being upfront about that from the start. But I think what's amazing about it is we've been able to harness a lot of volunteers, but not volunteers that are just doing random stuff, volunteers that are contributing to research and to insights that is assisting policymakers, government more broadly, and also NGOs, that during this time of COVID-19, what we do is actually thoughtful, it's research-based, and we try and coordinate in a manner that is not random, because I mean, although a lot of organizations might want to help, a random approach can be more disruptive than helpful. And you can have an incredible amount of duplication. So what we're trying to do in South Africa through this bootcamp initiative, through NGOs working with government, is to try to be more structured in our approach. And we're pretty excited. We're about halfway into this now. We're getting incredibly good feedback. we're getting incredibly good interest. The BBC contacted me today just to do a bit of a case study potentially from an international perspective. So we're super excited about what's happening, and even more so that we've got a big number of youth working with us. So these over 100 researchers that are working with us are mostly below 35. Many of them are university students. Some of them are teachers, as I mentioned earlier, and they're contributing across these 12 thematic areas under the guidance of an experienced researcher, and also working with peer reviewers that are locally and internationally based. So let me stop there. That's a bit of a sense of something that's happening at the moment around COVID-19. And I'm happy to take questions and discussions, and actually suggestions will be even greater. We have to work together to manage this pandemic. And I think let's show the rest of the world as Africa, we can set the standard, we can set the benchmark really high, because we can manage these kind of things by harnessing the strengths within our communities and in our sectors. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. That was awesome, Dr. Kiwi. Thanks a lot for those insights and, you know, inspiring us to really take a comprehensive approach to addressing this issue. I mean, it's interesting to note all the different ways in which the education community, and it looks like particularly higher education, can take the lead in some of these efforts, from testing to tracing to helping restructure nutrition programs for affected students and families. So thank you very much for that. I think we'll take some questions from our Facebook Live, and then also I have a few questions that I'll ask in the meantime. Maybe we'll open up to the panelists as well before we introduce them in case they have any questions for Dr. Kiwi. So my first question will be around research outputs. How have these outputs looked like? How have they been disseminated to the various stakeholders who are expected to respond to this? Because your organization cannot do both the research and then the actual action, right? And you also mentioned collaborations with key organizations, ADIA, with ICBA, Addis Ababa, UNHQ, UN headquarters in Paris. So what are some of the practical outputs from this real-time research that you have been doing? If you could give us examples so far.
Okay. So we're actually trying to do a bit of both. So as much as we're involved in the research, we're actively involved in the different initiatives as well.
Okay.
So we've got different people in different government committees and things that are managing it. So we're doing both. So what we're trying to do with some of the outputs, and I'll give you a sense now what they are, is to feed them into those discussions as they happen. Okay. I suppose one of the first places we do this is just by influencing. So many of these people that are involved in the government committees and whoever else are peer reviewers, or at least a little bit involved in the boot camp. So when they talk and when they discuss their plans, they're aware what's happening in the boot camp, and it influences their decision making. So that's kind of a soft touch, but it's an important one because it helps them to have the real-time access to some thinking that's happening. But the outputs more broadly, because time is against us, we're putting out short outputs at the moment on our website. So that's kind of blogs and stuff. So that's happening. Okay. We put out a 10-page 2-3 days ago. And the 10-page tries to capture what I've shared with you now. Okay. What we will be doing from next week as well is to start looking at some infographics that will be coming out. Mm-hmm. And then the last one we'll do is, I'm hoping, and we're still brainstorming around this a little bit. This has been very quick. We haven't been able to plan this really. Okay. And what we're thinking about potentially is for each of the 12 themes is to put out a little bit more of an academic paper that can be collated into a publication to give the young researchers publication opportunity, mm-hmm. But also to make this contribution academically more meaningful. So it's a little bit of all of the above, okay. But there's an urgency to help now, while there's also a bit of a medium to long-term plan to give exposure to the researchers that are involved. Does that help?
Okay, yeah, that helps. That's wonderful. But I was just also wondering, I know South Africa compared to other African countries has more established welfare programs, right? So including nutrition assistance programs for schools and in I would say more disadvantaged areas, and also cash handouts for lower socioeconomic status families. And I was wondering, how has this research sort of helped to restructure that or to accelerate the process of ensuring that within this time, as needs are greater because of cut-off incomes, that the government or various stakeholders, whether charities, NGOs, are actually moving to fill in those gaps urgently, instead of the regular timeline that South Africa follows for welfare handouts? How has that changed, and how has your organization and your research team supported that?
So the quick answer there is we can't be everything to everybody. So these are things that need to happen. I agree with you. It's not specifically addressed through the research. What I am seeing coming through in South Africa is a call, a lobby from NGOs broadly and kind of the broader community for increased grants at this time. So to your point, that these grants will be increased for a short period and be released quicker. We're not specifically working in the area. I've got a team that is managing this boot camp, and they've threatened resigning if I add one more thing because it's getting too much. So yes, yeah. So your point is good, but we're not working specifically there except to influence maybe the nutrition program.
Okay, that's great. So we have a few questions coming from the live feed and comments as well. I'll feed them back to you. So Yesu Getu, I don't know from which country, I presume maybe from Ethiopia, is commenting that internet coverage to different areas should be considered because currently all students are distributed at different places where even there's no light and mobile data. So I remember that you mentioned the zero data program that you have with some of the telcos in South Africa. What has the impact of that program been so far, especially for rural and low SES youth who have had to leave school back to their homes?
So it's helping. The telcos are slow in responding, to be honest. It's, of course, very expensive for them to do this. So it's been slow. It's getting there. We've got about 50 to 80 different offerings that are zero rated now. The challenge for disadvantaged communities is even if the data or the application or the website is zero rated, they still need to communicate with each other, like a teacher with kids or across teachers. So even when it comes to communication, many of these communities are restricted. And although they could use WhatsApp groups and so on, it's still data. So I think my short answer here would be it's been mixed, the impact. It could definitely be better. And we're lobbying and pushing very hard with the telcos to help more because they've been slow in responding. It's not like they haven't responded at all, but they've been slow. What we are doing at the moment, maybe just to add on to that, is to look at alternatives. And the alternatives are TV and radio. We sometimes forget how simple TV and radio is and how effective it can be. So we're actually focusing quite a bit at the moment for those really disadvantaged communities, together with the zero rating initiative. But let's focus on TV. I spoke to somebody earlier today from the UK. And she told me the BBC is busy with a process to offer 7 hours of teaching to school grades, different school grades every day. And I'm like, wow, that's simple. TV reaches all the kids, get a really good teacher, teach grade 1, teach grade 2, teach grade 3, and you can actually make a massive impact with low technology. So I think there are options beyond just data.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. It seems like those options are viable, but one would also want to think of how to coordinate all these different efforts, right? Because already, at least from the example in Ghana, I know that there's some who are using both internet and then also WhatsApp platforms. Data for WhatsApp is already a problem, but does that mean what does that mean for equity of access, right? Does the quality remain the same? But from your response, the thing is to ensure that people actually do have options at all. And so we need to move urgently on that.
There's a risk that we deepen inequality with what we're doing now. And that's the risk, and we've got to be very careful.
Yeah, exactly. There's that risk as well. There's a question that I have for the panelists, but then I'm going to ask it now and then ask it again after they have shared perspectives from their countries. So basically, what happens, because already we're 4 weeks into lockdown, some people have access to internet, some do not. Some may still have final exams online. And then the new academic year opens and then you find out that X percentage of disadvantaged students are behind. And then the few advantaged ones are on course with their program. Are we also thinking about mitigation strategies for how to ensure that by the end of all this, if some people are behind, they're able to catch up some way or the other. What are some of the strategies? Are we thinking ahead to post, pandemic, bridging the gap between, internet divide?
I can just give you an example from South Africa, what we're doing with the schools. It's not university, but from the schools.
Okay.
We're going to be phasing in, the plan at the moment is to phase in 2 grades at a time after lockdown, to allow those grades. So we're going to start with our matrics first and our grade 7s. And then every 2-3 weeks after that, phasing 2 more grades with clear plans in the interim, how they will be supported to catch up. But I don't have an answer for that question. That question is a very difficult one. And the only way one can agree on this is to set a set of principles in place through some kind of national process. And in South Africa, we've got an association of universities. That this association sets some guidelines for universities around managing inequality during this time. And then for universities as autonomous bodies, because in most of our countries, they're very autonomous, to make up their own decision how they're going to address that. But let's at least give them some guidelines and make them attentive to the fact that this is not fair. It cannot be fair. And what are the things as a university you'll put in place? And it's all the things we spoke about now, but universities will have different approaches. I just got a message now from one of our big universities in South Africa. Same thing, 0 rating their platforms. So look, 0 rating goes a long way. But not everybody is going to, even 0 rating, it's not going to help everybody, but it'll go a long way for university students.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, just thinking of all this, like I know examples of communities that, even with free data, they do not even have that internet access at all, even on their phones. And so there's a lot
of the devices. They don't all have the devices, exactly.
Yeah, they don't even have the devices. And even if they did, they would not have good enough service, to download pictures on WhatsApp, for example. Even if it was like pictures of notes, scanned notes. So thank you very much for your responses. I think we have to move on to the panelists. And Dr. Kiwi, if you still be on, I think you can chip in with some of the answers that the panelists will be given.
Sure, happy to do.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, pleasure.
Okay, so we're moving on to the panelists now. The All African Students Union is a really special organization because it has membership from all 54 African countries, which means that hopefully we have audience from all these countries. But today on our panel, we have people representing the student unions or other relevant organizations from all the different regions in Africa. So from North to South, East, West, and Central Africa. So I think what we'll do now is let's start with introductions, brief introductions. So everybody just take a minute to introduce yourself and your organization, what work you do, maybe a bit about your educational and professional background, just in a minute. And so that should be helpful for our audience. And then afterwards, I realized I have to introduce myself properly as well. So I'll do that as well. So let's start with Mishek, please.
Oh, thank you very much, All African Union, Students Union. My name is Mishek Mugabe. I'm the president of the South African Union of Students, and I will be speaking today for Southern African countries. I will be speaking about our experiences this side of the region of the continent and some of the best practices that can be done in this time of coronavirus. Thank you very much.
All right, wonderful. Claude?
Alors, bonjour, je suis Claude Marie-Thérence Andongou. Je suis la coordinatrice pays du programme de volontariat de la Fondation Obama. Et c'est un plaisir cet après-midi de partager ces moments avec vous, notamment sur la situation préoccupante qui est celle du coronavirus. Je suis diplômée de droit international humanitaire à Harvard University. Et oui, je partagerai mon expérience et toutes les solutions qu'on pourrait proposer dans ce type de circonstances. Merci.
Okay. Claude, can you give us a short English translation, please, en anglais?
Okay. So I'm Claude Marie-Thérence Andongou from Gabon. Yes, I'm Claude Marie-Thérence Andongou from Gabon, and it's a great pleasure for me to share this moment with you. I'm the national coordinator of the Obama Foundation African Service, and yes, I'm graduate from the Harvard University on human rights. Human right, yes.
Okay.
I want to make sure, is it everybody hear me? Because
yeah, I think I can hear you. I think
okay.
it's better now.
That's fine.
All right, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Claude. So we'll go to Isaac J. Hyde from Ghana. Isaac, are you there? All right, let's go on to Anne. Anne, can you kindly introduce yourself?
My name is Anne Mwangi Mvuria. I am the president of the University of Nairobi Students Association. I am also the president of all universities in Kenya, and I am going to be giving you a brief about what's happening in Kenya.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Anne. And then finally, we have Sophia from Morocco.
Yes, hello, my name is Sophia Najid. I'm from Morocco, and I am the leader of students of Master in Geopolitics and International Relations in Kadir Ayad University, Marrakesh. I'm really glad to be with you today, and I will present the situation of international students here in Morocco during this pandemic time.
All right, great. Thank you, Sophia. So, Sophia, we're going to start with you as well. Let's go clockwise around Africa. So starting from the north, can you give us a brief situation analysis of immediate responses and reactions to the pandemic and announcement of the lockdown? What was it like in your countries, and particularly within the education ecosystem? So all of us here are either higher education students or work with higher education in some form, but you can comment first on higher education and then generally how, you know, like schooling, like the schooling system has been impacted or has reacted to this lockdown and the pandemic as well.
Okay, the situation here in Morocco is difficult, of course, but under control until now, thanks God, and I hope it will continue. Today there are 2,283 positive cases, which is really huge, and 130 deaths, 249 recovered. We are under lockdown since 4 weeks until now, with the curfew at 6 p.m. Universities and schools are obviously closed. We cannot go out without a specific authorization from a public authority and without a mask. The King Mohammed VI has launched a special fund dedicated to managing the coronavirus pandemic, dedicated, among other things, to covering the costs of the medical device and the means implemented to support the economic and social consequences of the crisis. And the national community reacted with a wave of solidarity. The fund amounts to $3,040 million until now, which is really great. And contributors are public and private Moroccan companies, leading figures here in Morocco, members of government, MPs, senior officials, for example, ambassadors and universities presidents who donate the equivalent of 1 month's salary, citizens, etc. There are so many measures taken here by the government, especially with for the higher education. But the problem is that we don't know yet when and how the final exams will be organized.
Okay.
This is a challenge here.
Okay. All right, we'll come back to the measures. So thanks for giving us that background information. Thank you, Sophia. So let's move on to Anne from Kenya, and she'll be giving us the situation in Kenya and from East Africa as well.
So in Kenya, as of yesterday, we have 234 confirmed cases, 11 deaths, and 53 recoveries. There have been over 10,000 people who've been tested, and this started from the 13th of March when they first announced the first case of coronavirus in Kenya. The government gave an order that all schools would be closed as from then on. So students went back home from the 13th that first week was when a lot of students were going back home. Since then, we have seen the introduction of online learning by the education sector, and Ministry of Education has also given that directive that there should be online learning. There is a curfew in Kenya that starts from 7 p.m. to 5 a.m. in the morning. There has been cessation of movement from one county to the other. There are 4 counties that have been locked down. These are the counties that have experienced the highest rates of coronavirus cases. So there have been locked down that we do not go and spread to other counties, and especially to the elderly in our society. The government has done a lot in terms of trying to help out its citizens. Just yesterday, the president announced that there will be an 8.5 billion Kenya shilling fund that will be used to give to the elderly and the vulnerable people in the society. They will be receiving a monthly stipend during this period of the coronavirus. In Kenya right now, you cannot go out without a mask. And we have seen universities step up and start manufacturing and making masks and giving them out for free to members of the society. Leaders are donating food and carrying out fumigation, whereby from 7 p.m. to 5 a.m. in the morning, we have our streets being fumigated, especially places that have high numbers of people there, as like bus stations. They are fumigated on a daily basis. This is to reduce the number of cases that the country records, and we have seen that the trend has really gone down. They have discouraged social gathering, like if there's any death that occurs, whether it's from a coronavirus patient or not, there should not be more than 10 people in that gathering, and the burial should take place within 24 hours in Kenya. There are tax reliefs that have been given by the government for a lot of commodities in Kenya. So we can see that the government is doing a lot to help the people in Kenya to survive this pandemic.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for that background and for getting into the measures. So we will revisit the measures that government and educational institutions have been taking to mitigate the impact on both the vulnerable and also students who will very likely be struggling right now to keep up with their education and daily lives as well. So thank you again, Anne. So we'll move on to Mishek from South Africa.
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, I think as a way of introduction, you would know that this coronavirus, we regard it as an overseas disease because it only came to Africa through people who had traveled overseas. And then when they come back, local people contacted them and then it started to spread like that. So we don't want to enter into a debate whether it's a Chinese or American like Donald Trump saying, but what we can say is that it's an overseas virus that came to our shores as a continent. And I think for you to understand the context of Southern Africa, we cannot analyze it outside Africa as a whole and outside the world. And you know that in the world, cases are 2.1 million as of today, and positive cases are 2.1 million, and 146,000 deaths are recorded, and also 542,000 people recovered from the virus in the world. But in Africa as a whole, you know that the continent has recorded 18,473 positive cases as of today. 48 deaths, 968,000 deaths have been recorded in the continent, and 4,300 people recovered in the Africa as a whole. So let me come to Southern Africa. Now in Southern Africa, because I said that I will speak for Southern Africa and for South Africa in terms of the higher education. So in Southern Africa, you know that Zimbabwe has recorded 24 cases of people infected. In Zambia, there are 48 people infected by the virus. In Mozambique, there are 31 people. In Botswana, there are 15 people. Swaziland, there are 17 people. And then in South Africa, 95,000 tests has been conducted. Out of these 95,000 tests conducted, 2,605 positive cases are confirmed. As of today, 903 people recovered, 48 people confirmed dead because of coronavirus. But what is more interesting about Southern Africa is that is where you find that there is also one country where no case has been recorded. That is Lesotho. It's at 0 cases infected, 0 deaths. They've already conducted some cases, and all those cases were found to be negative. But also, I think it's good for the panel and for those who are listening to also understand that the country in Africa with the highest cases as of today is Egypt at 2,673 cases. So the sources where I got this is the World Health Organization and Johns Hopkins University. So you get all these details. But what does that tell us about Africa and the world? It shows you that in Africa, the virus has less impact compared to the rest of the world so far. Because in Africa, total cases, if there are 18,000 cases of positive people, you find out that those cases are less than Italy alone as a country. They are less than United States of America alone as a country. They are less than Germany alone as a country. We only have 18,000 cases of people who are positive in the continent. So it means that we are doing well in terms of trying to mitigate the spread of the virus as a continent. But now, what is the impact of this virus? Because even if cases are few, there is the impact of the virus. So I can tell you from the higher education sector point of view, because I know that the virus has affected all other sectors. It has disrupted the economy, it has disrupted politics, it has disrupted the social structures, and so on and so forth. But in terms of the higher education sector, the virus has done the following things. It has caused the following impact. Number one, it has disrupted teaching and learning because classes are not continuing. Our universities have been closed now due to the lockdown. That is the first impact of the virus. Number two, this coronavirus has caused the research to be discontinued. Field research, you can't go to the field and successfully do research, especially if you don't have these permits and all other things for the university. So students who are doing postgraduate research are not able to proceed with their studies because research has been discontinued. Even academics who do research, they are not able to proceed. Number three, international research conferences that require you to travel and attend research conferences, they have been stopped. They can't proceed because there are travel bans because of the lockdown. Number four, graduation ceremonies stopped. They can't continue. I'm one of the students who was due to graduate in May for my master's. I'm not able to graduate. Graduations are postponed because of this coronavirus. And I know many students who were due to graduate are not able to graduate because of this coronavirus. So that is one of the impact that graduations has been suspended in most of our universities. But also university residences have been closed. Remember, university residences, we use them as centers also for teaching and learning, but also a conducive environment for students to live whilst they are pursuing their studies. Yeah. And you know that when some of the students come from abusive families such that they feel free when they're in university residence. So those residences have been closed currently, and university students have been told to go back home. They can't access internet. I am not sure if many students are able even to listen to this conversation because they don't have access to Wi-Fi, because they get Wi-Fi in their university residences. It's one of the impact of coronavirus. But lastly, you know that this virus have exposed existing inequalities in our societies. You know that South Africa is one of the highly unequal societies, but in many countries as well, even if you go down to Botswana, if you go down to Mozambique, you'll find out that inequalities still exist. There is an elite, the haves, and then there is what are called the have-nots, in the words of Karl Marx. So those who are at the bottom end, in the periphery of the economy, they are feeling the impact of the virus. They are not able to get food, to put food on the table. They don't have a source of income. And part of those involve families whom some of our students come from, because majority of our students come from the poor and the working class families. So this coronavirus had a lot of impact. So for purposes of your question, I think that I will be able to wait for the next one. For now, I just giving it.
Thank you for that very detailed background. So we'll get more into the impact as well, so that all the other panelists will also get to share more about more, tangible impacts that their countries and regions are facing. So let's go on to Jay Hyde from Ghana now. And then Jay, you can introduce yourself and then give us a situational analysis of, when the lockdown began and then where things are right now.
Thank you very much, my brother Kojo. As you are aware, anyway, my name is Ict J. Hyde, and president of the National Union of Ghana Students. Much as we were expecting this, we were very much not prepared for this. And we have COVID here in Ghana. So somewhere last month on the 26th, the president gave an address after Ghana recorded its first COVID case in the country. As it stands now, we recorded over 600 cases, about 9 deaths, and about 83 recoveries. Our health service and frontline personnel have been very proactive. It comes with pride, as much as we are in these times, that Ghana has one of the highest testing regimes in the world, with over 55,000 tests done so far, out of which we've done this, we've identified these cases. The contact tracing team has also been very effective. We have the lockdown in place. In the aspect of education, it's not been very good for education like any other place. I'll start with international students, because I say that they are the ones who I believe will bear the bigger brunt of this. We have lockdown in our country, and so they are unable to access various means by which they can take care of themselves. Beyond the limitations that they face in Ghana, it's also the challenges that their parents are facing in whichever country that they are coming from, such that there's no transfer. For instance, Nigeria has a very large number of students who are studying in Ghana. Nigeria is on a lockdown in some places, and so parents are unable to send support to their students, to their children or wards here in Ghana. And so you see how difficult the situation is for the average international student here. From the National Union of Ghana Students' perspective, we've also established a food bank initiative where we are supporting students who are needy or genuinely needy students with some data support and then the food to support them in these trying times. The call center, the first day of setting it up, within 5 hours, the call center had received over 2,000 phone calls from students who were seeking support from our outfit. The program is still ongoing. We are hoping to extend it to as many students as much as possible as we get funds for it. In terms of general education, we've made a couple of demands when various university groups like the University Student Association of Ghana, the Ghana Union of Professional Students, and the Graduate Student Association of Ghana made some calls on the National Council for Tertiary Education for them to come up with a roadmap as to how we're going to implement e-learning. Because as part of the president's directive, when the country was going on a lockdown for schools to close, was the need for every institution to move onto an e-learning platform. Now, prior to this, there had been a survey across the country to check the country's readiness on how it can implement e-learning. That's because Ghana has implemented a few years ago what you call the free education for senior high school students. In that regard, over 40% increment came for senior high school education, and for which reason in September, we are expected to have a higher number of students who are to enter education, the tertiary education, than it had been over the period. Therefore, the government, in a proactive manner, decided that there's a need to conduct a survey to see what other measures can be put in place to avoid congestion on the campuses, for which reason e-learning or open education became a major component of this discussion.
Isaac, I think we've lost Isaac there.
The COVID situation actually, sped the process for us to implement this, and for which reason we've come to start e-learning on our various campuses. Even though it has started, it has come with a number of challenges. Access to data by students is quite a challenge, because the point is that students have paid school fees. Now they have to spend money each and every day to bundle in order to access lectures online. Also, issues about school fees. Over 34,000 Ghanaian students rely on the Student Loan Trust Fund, which is a government's loan scheme to students that supports them in their education. Due to this challenge, we realized that the Student Loan Secretariat is unable to do disbursement. Beyond the disbursement is also that we recognize the fact that these are trying times where governments are trying to mobilize resources to support the fight against COVID. And so it's also a bit challenging on our part as students to go and give government pressure or to mount pressure on government to pay some of these loans. Then lastly, the issue as to whether or not students have to take e-learning examinations online. Also because we look at the infrastructure regime of students. Now, for you to go onto e-learning platforms, you need to have the gadgets and, of course, the reliable network. If we fix straight timelines for students to write exams online, our challenge is that students who are within areas under lockdown and are unable to access a good network who are going to be in a very disadvantaged position. And for that matter, the National Union of Ghana Students petitioned the Ministry of Education and the government to come up with a solution to this problem before we roll out e-learning fully. I apologize for my late coming into this meeting because as at that time I was in the meeting which I just finished. We've not gotten conclusive position on government based on the demands that were put, but at least there has been some progress. Moving forward, institutions or our students on a student loan are not going to be denied access to their e-learning platforms because government is going to take responsibility for that. All institutions are going to be engaged to allow their students to have access to the e-learning platforms. Okay. Also, issues about data, government is also going to engage the telcos from tomorrow to come up with a roadmap as to whether we are going to have a zero net charge for all students to access e-learning platforms, or we are going to give some data available. We are going to make some data available to students so that those who can go to YouTube to learn on other things are also going to be made available to them.
Okay, great. Can you comment now on other countries within the West African region? Do you know what some of the efforts are from other student unions? Have you been in touch with other student unions? Do you know what the efforts of the governments and educational systems are?
Well, from that perspective, I would like to speak from what the All Africa students have been doing, because that has been the medium for which we get information from our other colleagues in other countries. And I'll take this opportunity to commend the Secretariat of the All Africa students. They've been very proactive. About a fortnight ago, they hosted all student leaders across the continent for them to share perspective as to what is happening in their country, in their various countries. And that is how we got to know that, of course, countries like Rwanda, Uganda, Kenya, and co are supporting their students with data. Here in West Africa, we also got to know from Liberia, Nigeria, and other places what the government is doing. It is not over yet, but there's still a lot of things for us to learn and support each other.
Okay, thank you very much, Isaac. So we'll come back to you with the following, with the questions that will follow up. Now we have Claude from Gabon. And Claude, please do well to speak on other countries within your region and what they are doing in response to this.
Yes, definitely. Okay, so as I told you, I will introduce myself in French because there's a lot of countries speaking French who are connected.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for doing that.
Alors, pour ce qui est du Gabon et d'Afrique centrale en général, en alignement avec les priorités stratégiques du secrétariat général des Nations Unies, en ce qui est de contenir la propagation du coronavirus dans la sous-région et notamment au Gabon en particulier, le gouvernement a mis en place un certain nombre de mesures, notamment un comité de pilotage qui est là de manière permanente pour surveiller l'évolution de la pandémie au niveau local. Également, il a été mis en place par le gouvernement sous les auspices du président de la République, Ali Bongo Ndimba. Des messages de sensibilisation sont diffusés sur un certain territoire national, donc en langue locale, pour permettre à ce que l'information soit accessible à tous à la même enseigne. Et pour ce qui est des mesures barrières, des programmes, des sensibilisations sont amplifiées. J'aimerais souligner ici qu'à côté des actions menées par le gouvernement, la société civile également a un rôle primordial parce qu'ils sont près des communautés et c'est eux qui font véritablement le travail de terrain à la fin de la journée. Donc, autant d'actions ont été menées et dernièrement, eu égard aux chiffres croissants de la propagation du coronavirus au Gabon en particulier, le gouvernement a décidé d'abord de mettre en place une campagne de dépistage généralisé et derrière le confinement global donc de Libreville et de ses environs a été décrété pour ici contenir le coronavirus, la propagation du coronavirus et permettre à sorte qu'on trouve des solutions qui aideraient nos populations. Pour répondre à la deuxième priorité stratégique du secrétaire général des Nations Unies, de réduire la détérioration des avoirs et des biens des biens et des droits humains. Le Gabon, le président de la République a mis en place un certain nombre de mesures sociales pour accompagner les populations en cette période difficile, notamment l'allocation qui est désormais, qui normalement devrait être désormais gratuite, l'accès à l'électricité qui est également gratuite, une banque alimentaire qui jusqu'aujourd'hui se limite seulement à Libreville, qui est donc ouvert aux populations les plus vulnérables, et également des mesures économiques pour accompagner tous les entrepreneurs qui ont été affectés donc l'affaire ont été affectés par la pandémie. Seulement, justement, pour continuer dans cette même approche, justement, pour montrer tout ce que le gouvernement a mis en place pour accompagner les populations dans ce défi, pour protéger et assister les personnes vulnérables, des programmes spécifiques ont été mis en place pour accompagner toutes les personnes vivant avec le VIH/SIDA et les personnes vivant avec un handicap. Seulement, je voudrais relever ici que pour la situation particulière des apprenants et des étudiants, aucune mesure jusqu'ici n'a été prise de manière spécifique. On a des programmes, on a dernièrement le programme d'éducation qui passe à la télévision, mais l'accès à l'énergie, donc à ces programmes-là, reste un vrai défi parce que une fois sur deux, l'électricité est coupée dans notre région. Je parle du Gabon, mais c'est une situation qui est généralisée à toute l'Afrique centrale. L'accès à l'énergie est un vrai défi. L'accès à Internet, parce que pour avoir Internet, il faut avoir l'énergie. Donc, tous les apprenants de l'intérieur du pays ont du mal jusqu'ici à véritablement accès à toutes les plateformes qui sont mises en place, tant au niveau du numérique que sur le plan de manière formelle, donc au travers de la télévision. Par ailleurs, j'aimerais aussi mettre en exergue ici tous les efforts menés par la société civile, notamment les jeunes qui ont été les premiers justement pour répondre à ce besoin pour répondre aux besoins des apprenants et des étudiants en général, qui ont mis en place une plateforme en ligne, donc je vais nommer ici www.cynthia.me, qui aujourd'hui a près de 10 000 jeunes apprenants connectés de tous les niveaux, au niveau de l'école primaire et du secondaire, et qui a 500 bénévoles, professeurs bénévoles qui sont disponibles justement à accompagner les élèves aujourd'hui. C'est vraiment des initiatives comme ça qui finalement apportent des réponses concrètes à cette difficulté, et également des ONG pour accompagner justement le manque économique et social que les populations aujourd'hui qui sont sur le terrain. J'ai à l'esprit l'ONG Malachi qui, à côté de la banque alimentaire mise en place par le gouvernement, a également une banque alimentaire pour répondre à des besoins spécifiques des populations, parce que comme on le sait, les décisions gouvernementales ont une vision large, mais maintenant pour vraiment toucher les populations au quotidien, il faut des relais, et ces relais sont notamment la société civile et tous les acteurs sociaux qui sont autour. Pour parler, et je vais finir par là en français pour ensuite m'étaler en anglais, pour parler de la situation des réfugiés, parce qu'il faut que l'on le souligne ici. L'Afrique elle contient un tiers des réfugiés dans le monde. Donc, la situation de ces personnes qui est déjà difficile dans des situations ordinaires est encore plus difficile aujourd'hui, parce que l'accès à l'éducation est un défi. Ces populations souvent n'ont pas des ressources, donc qui dit ne pas avoir des ressources dit inévitablement ne pas avoir accès à toutes les commodités pour avoir accès à Internet, avoir accès à une télévision et tout ça. Donc, la situation particulière des réfugiés est préoccupante aujourd'hui, et c'est ici le lieu vraiment d'interpeller tous les gouvernements qui nous écoutent en ce moment pour dire qu'il faut adapter une solution à ces populations-là qui ne sont pas en dehors de la pandémie, qui la vivent à la même enseigne que nous, et qu'il faudrait véritablement que chaque pays adapte des stratégies pour accompagner ces populations. Les réfugiés et les déplacés. In English, resume in English, yes. I make a brief description of the situation here in the Central of Africa. That the government do a lot for people, but there's still a lack of things we miss in the board, and the civil society have a central action, and they also help the community to be a part of the solution and how they can be supported and yes, for the refugees and the one in that situation, until now there's no real politicians who are taking that on the board, and there's population are in the normal situation very live in vulnerability, and now according to because of coronavirus, I think there is the most vulnerable of in the world, and we need to really think about them and find good solutions to put them in the board. And yes, that they are right for attend to have education. Others that would not be.
All right, thank you, Claude Marie. That was a very elaborate description of the situation in Central Africa and Gabon especially. And so let's move on to the next question. I think that a lot of you already touched on some of the challenges and some of the measures, but I'll open up that question again briefly. And let's try and stick to 1 minute answers because we have a whole list of different issues to touch on within the next 30 to 40 minutes. So let's talk about both positive, measures and responses that have taken place and some of the challenges that still persist. Sophia, can you tell us what some of the initiatives, the positive initiatives have been in your country, generally like in response to struggles that would be faced by students who are trying to migrate from face-to-face education onto online platforms? What are some of the challenges and what measures have been taken to mitigate that?
Yes, the challenge of the e-learning is the lack of tools, of course, for us and for all the African students. We know that not all the students have computer or laptop, and even if they have, the access to e-learning websites is free. They don't have a computer or laptop, or maybe they are a big family and they have only computer for everyone. So it's very challenging. And distance learning in the actual conditions cannot replace the direct contact, reactivity, and the interactivity necessary for the transmission of certain knowledge and skills. And in the medium and long term, I think that it is necessary to set up the digitalization of knowledge from primary school and develop digital culture in order to face the future more serenely.
Okay, wonderful. Those are good suggestions. And I mean, later on, we'll have to get into the details of how we're going to do that and whether we have the platforms. Because don't forget, even on this particular chat, we are using, a platform that is not created in Africa, right? That was created for other purposes. And to put universities' materials online and to follow various teaching methods across the continent, we would have to have adaptive systems that can actually allow for that. So I don't know what some of the challenges have been from the perspective of the teachers as well. I don't know if Mishek or Anne, if you could share some of that. Do you know some of the challenges being faced by students, but also by the schools and teachers as well in using whatever platforms currently exist? And what are some of the other challenges that students are facing? So Mishak, you've already mentioned the impact on research, graduations, residential life for foreign students. We'll come back to the question of foreign or international students and how they are coping at this time. But let's deal with online platforms and migration to digital learning. How has that been specifically in South Africa? What have been the complaints from both students and from teachers or from the suppliers of education as well?
Okay, so what is happening now is that there are some universities that have issued communique that students, classes are resuming on Monday for students but they will be resuming through online platforms.
Okay.
Wits University is one of those universities that have issued that communique, and other institutions of higher learning. But we have got an issue about that question of online learning. And one of the biggest student organizations here in South Africa, SASCO, issued a statement today condemning the immediate introduction of e-learning. And we have got EFF Student Command, they are also having some concerns about e-learning. But ourselves as a non-partisan student union, we have got a position about e-learning. We have got issues that we have identified. One of it is that e-learning might compromise the prestige of some of the qualifications that are offered by universities. For example, Papa Kojo, if we are given an assessment or some of the work to do online, how sure is your lecturer to know that it's you who has done that work at home? Or it can be done by your friend or your brother online. So it's going to compromise the prestige.
The integrity of the degree, yeah.
The integrity of some of the qualifications. Number two, online platforms have got its own challenges. You know that the digital divide is a critical issue due to issues I've raised of socio-economic inequalities. Now, there are students who are from deep villages where they might not have access to network. Some students are already writing to us that some of the villages we come from don't have network, we don't have access to electricity. It means that they will not be able to partake on online platforms whilst they are at home. So they will be excluded in the process from performing their academic activities. Number three, you would know that some of the students do not afford data to be able to access online. The issue of data, I've raised it, is a critical issue. Data is very expensive. Actually, before the lockdown, there was a campaign about data, that data must fall, such that the Competition Commission here in South Africa got to be involved because it's a big issue. So if it's a big issue for the country, what more for the students who do not have any source of income? So you would see that they will not be able to partake on their studies. Also, some of the students will not have even these portable gadgets. So there are challenges about online platforms.
Misha, can I ask you, as the head of the Students' Union, have you had any direct complaints from students who have now had to go back to some of the rural townships and participate in online learning from there? What have been some of their direct complaints with respect to this issue?
Yeah, some of the issues that I've been raising, that they are not able,
Are you getting a lot of complaints, and what channels are these students using to address their concerns?
Of course, they address their concerns to their institutions, but also majority of students were addressing through us. So we've written to the minister already about these issues. We've prepared a comprehensive document about these issues of e-learning. Part of what we think needs to be done now is that we need digital infrastructure development as one of the key interventions. Because even academics, some of the academics do not know and they are not sure how to use the online platform as a way of teaching their students, or they don't have even the resources, some of the academics. You don't have proper offices at your home to be able to conduct and prepare these, because when you're at home, you have all other social problems that you face, which might hinder you to deliver as an academic. So we're saying there must be proper digital infrastructure development. There must be provision of gadgets, electronic gadgets and data to students. The network providers are being engaged to provide what are called zero-rated data to students. But what we're saying is that students who are from deep rural villages, they must not be excluded on the basis that they are from villages. There must be network coverage. If not be, then there must be a reconfiguration of the academic calendar.
We'll get to talking about those solutions later on. So let's do a bit of a problem identification now. Claude Marie, can you tell us what are some of the challenges that both students and academics are facing not just academics, but the whole breadth of stakeholders in the education sector? What are some of the challenges that they are facing in Gabon and around Central Africa, if you know of other examples?
Les défis prioritaires que les étudiants, et du moins le corps étudiantin en général, rencontrent au Gabon et en Afrique centrale en général, c'est bien sûr, comme vient de le dire le confrère de l'Afrique du Sud, ça reste l'accès en fait comment se connecter, parce que les cours sont disponibles, des plateformes sont créées, mais comment assurer le suivi derrière? En effet, comme je le disais tantôt dans mon propos, l'accès à Internet est encore un vrai défi, dû au fait que l'électricité n'est pas une constante. Il y a beaucoup de délestages qui font que les populations ne peuvent pas être, les apprenants ne peuvent pas être connectés à temps pour partager les infos, pour bénéficier des programmes qui leur sont proposés. Par ailleurs, pour les écoles, donc les écoles privées qui disposent de moins de ressources, quand je parle de cette difficulté, je pense principalement aux écoles publiques, mais pour les écoles privées, des solutions sont proposées, notamment à travers des créations de groupes WhatsApp où les professeurs peuvent discuter avec leurs apprenants et donc dispenser les cours à cet effet. Mais le défi prioritaire, malgré tout ce qui est mis en place par les gouvernements, ça reste ici l'accès à tous de l'éducation. C'est déjà une véritable problématique en temps normal. Donc, je veux dire, en dehors de la crise, ça devient encore une difficulté plus grande lorsque maintenant il faut à la fois restreindre les déplacements ainsi que l'accès à tout ce qui est comme ressources économiques et sociales. Donc, c'est l'un des défis prioritaires que nous identifierons ici en priorité et dire que tout ce qui est proposé, du moins tout ce qui est proposé jusqu'ici au niveau de l'Afrique centrale reste des initiatives des apprenants eux-mêmes ou alors de jeunes professionnels qui ont les facilités d'accès à Internet, donc qui ont créé des plateformes pour partager les connaissances. Mais pour l'école supérieure, vraiment, il faut le dire ici, ça reste une vraie difficulté. Pour les écoles primaires et puis secondaires, des solutions sont proposées avec des programmes à la télévision, avec des programmes sur Internet. Mais pour les écoles supérieures, notamment celles du public, ça reste un vrai challenge d'avoir accès à l'éducation. Et jusqu'ici, malheureusement, ces années on n'a pas encore de solution idoine pour accompagner cette frange de la population. Et j'aimerais aussi rappeler ici la situation précaire des populations en situation de déplacement ou les réfugiés qui, en temps normal, ont des difficultés à avoir accès à une éducation de qualité et qui aujourd'hui, parce qu'il n'y a pas de programme dédié pour ces populations-là, il n'y a pas d'aide dédiée à cette frange de la population, malheureusement, qui n'ont pas accès à des services d'éducation adaptés à la situation actuelle.
All right. Merci. And then en anglais, briefly.
Yes, en anglais. So I'm telling you in French that, yes, the greatest challenges the academic side have in this period is the connection, the network, because we have a lot of energy here in Central Africa and a lot of difficulty to have access to internet and other stuff. So all the programs are proposed in the internet or in television are not cannot be accessible for all the students around Africa, Central Africa. So yes, we still have a challenge there to really emphasize it and find a good solution for this problem. And also the position of refugees around Africa is also very stufful because there is not a solution for them.
I'm almost.
All right, Claude.
There's not yet a solution actually for them. And we need to really think about this population and yes, find a good solution quickly for them. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much for that, Claude. So Anne, you're next, and there's a question for you as well. Somebody, so Eyesu Getu mentions that East Africa has not only COVID-19 problems, but also very dangerous desert locust invasion in countries such as Ethiopia, Kenya, Somalia, and South Sudan. So we're talking about the COVID-19 problems and migration to digital education for both academics and students in Kenya and in East Africa. But can you also comment on, what is the composite effect of having a locust invasion, having, various problems, especially on the border with Somalia. Kenya also has some of the largest slums in Africa, the largest refugee camp. So considering all those different populations, can you, tell us what some of those challenges may be for both academics and then for students?
Okay. First and foremost, someone had asked about the situation in East Africa. I will give a brief situation of 3 countries in East Africa.
Let's take about 2 minutes to answer this.
Okay. So for Tanzania, they have 94 cases, 11 recoveries, 4 deaths. And as of 17th of March, all schools were closed in Tanzania. In Uganda, they have 55 cases, 4 recoveries, 0 deaths. And they were put under lockdown as from April 15th to May 5th. For Rwanda, they have 138 cases, 60 recoveries, and 0 deaths. They are also under lockdown. About the issue of invasion of locusts, this was something that affected East Africa before the coronavirus pandemic. So what happened was there were locusts that migrated from Somalia all the way down to East Africa, Kenya, and the countries that were mentioned. And they destroyed a lot of crops. So one of the challenges that Kenya faced, especially, I can speak about Kenya, one of the challenges that Kenya faced as we entered into the coronavirus pandemic was, will the country be able to sustain itself in terms of food production? Yet a lot of our crops had been destroyed by the locusts. So the government is still continuing to work to get rid of all the locusts, because till to date, they have not fully eliminated them from migrating, because they're still migrating from one county to the other and causing harm and destruction from one county to the other. About the issue of the border of Somalia and Kenya, even with the coronavirus pandemic, we have still seen that there have been fighting at the border, and there's still those challenges that are affecting our country. So our country is not only facing coronavirus pandemic, but we have a lot of other challenges and issues that are affecting us as a country. About the challenges of online learning in Kenya, especially especially for the ones who are under TVET. TVET is vocational training. They are more of manual work and practical work. Now that they're not, and then practical courses, now that they're not having access to their learning institutions, then they cannot be helped in terms of online learning, because a majority of what they do requires them to be physically there. Another problem is the lack of hardware, because Kenya and other Eastern African countries are third world countries. People do not have laptops or phones that can be able to download large quantities of documents that are required for you to be able to learn and to keep up with your studies. Issues of infrastructure like electricity. Electricity is not in all parts of the country. Therefore, you cannot expect a person to be able to log into their online platform and study, yet they don't have electricity to charge their phone or even charge that laptop that they had gotten. Kenya had, when we were electing the current government, they had promised to bring laptops to all first graders in the country. So if that would have been implemented, then we would see that, especially for the lower levels of learning, that there would be continuance of online learning. But now, because of such problems and lack of, they did not achieve what they had promised, now we are seeing that online learning has really stalled, and a majority of students have rejected online learning.
So let me just follow up there. What are the students doing? Because I also suspected that some would just not participate, even apart from the fact that some do not have access to data, internet, etc. I suspect that some students, just because of the change in format, would struggle to adapt. What are some of the the issues surrounding that? Is that happening where there are students who are just not participating in online learning? And why would that be happening?
I can only speak about the University of Nairobi. So once they introduced online learning and they said that they expected that we would start having online classes, we as the student leaders protested and said, there are very many challenges. Not all of us come from well-up families. Others come from needy families that cannot afford at this time even data bundles. So one of the things that the University of Nairobi did was, one, we had ICT training where they retaught people how to download, upload, use computers online. So these were things that were recorded and then shared online, and people were able to access so that they can even learn the basic things about computers. Apart from that, the University of Nairobi gave out free data bundles to all students. So students can now get free data bundles, hence they can access online learning. But still, this has been a challenge because a majority of them, as I said, lack the proper hardware to
make use
to access this online platform. Yeah, to access this online platform. So though the university is doing a lot in conjunction with the student leaders to ensure that this thing is a success, it is still a problem that we are seeing that cannot be fully solved as of right now.
Okay, thank you for that. So I'm going to read a perspective that hasn't been shared here. So I think we are missing some of the voices of the island countries around Africa, and it's fair that we have a contribution from here that we can read out. So thank you, Gaia from Mauritius. Gaia from Mauritius says, our government has facilitated learning by broadcasting lessons on TV from grades 1 to 9. From grade 10 to 13, the educator is conducting online sessions by the use of Zoom, Google Classroom, WhatsApp, and email. Wi-Fi capacity has been increased to facilitate the use of ICT.
Watching from Germany.
However, some students from low economic backgrounds still have no access to internet. These particular students are suffering in the process. So it looks like this is a very universal challenge that we're facing across the whole continent. And I mean, soon we have to move quickly to figure out what some of the solutions are. Let's hear from Sophia and Jay, if Jay is around. Let's learn from them. Like, I think the challenges are universal at this moment. So let's hear more about what are some of the solutions that the government or the educational system is undertaking to ensure universal access to whether digital education or whatever alternatives that they have put in place. So tell us more about alternatives in Morocco and in North Africa, Sophia.
Yes, if you mind, I want to share some information about the situation of foreign students, as we know that there are so many international
We'll get back to that. We'll get to that next. So can you tell us more of, like, on the solution side, is there almost universal access to online education or various stipulated educational alternatives in Morocco right now?
I don't think there are alternatives. The students and the leaders have to explain to students that we have to respect and follow the instructions. Our professors have laptops, and they are educated to how to learn on with e-learning. So the problem here is that the students have to follow what's said by the authorities, and we can't do anything. We have to learn the lessons, and for the next pandemic or the next crisis, we have to be aware, and we have to how can I do this? Can I say it in French?
Yeah, please go ahead, say it in French.
Le problème qu'on a maintenant, c'est que les professeurs ont été instruits par rapport au fait qu'il fallait donner des cours sur Zoom, sur Google School, etc. Mais le problème qui reste, c'est que il y a beaucoup d'étudiants qui, comme papa l'a dit, beaucoup d'étudiants qui, malgré le fait qu'ils aient Internet ou qu'ils aient des ordinateurs chez eux, ne veulent pas forcément se fier à ça et qui préfèrent reporter ça ou demander des années blanches. Et je ne pense pas du tout que ce soit le problème.
Okay, merci. Now, does your country have any non-digital alternatives or none at all? Are there any non-digital alternatives to learning at this moment? Is this something that's a possibility, Sophia?
No, we don't have any alternative. The only alternative is to the e-learning.
Okay, all right. And then Isaac, can you tell us a bit about responses in Ghana and if there are any alternatives to e-learning, seeing as, you know, our universities, our secondary schools are a melting pot of people from all over the country, from all different backgrounds, and it's very likely a very huge percentage do not have access to these resources, even with free bundles. What have been the current interventions? And you mentioned that you are having meetings to brainstorm some alternatives. Have there been any ideas that have come up so far?
Right, thank you very much. Well, so the issues that my colleague presidents have raised cut across a number of the African countries. Issues about data and network reliability have been common among all. And also, the cost aspect of some of these things is not just its availability, but the cost, especially in the lockdown. So it means that we have two categories of people who cannot afford and people who have the means but can still not buy the data because due to the lockdown, you cannot have free movement and other things. Then again, of course, the question as to whether schools are going to grade students in these times, because I mean, if a student cannot log onto the e-platform, not because the person doesn't have the will, but because the means is not there due to the nature of the situation we find ourselves. I think that these are some of the concerns that we need to look at. But the reality is also that we did not just get up to say that, you know, we got into the age of technology, so we are implementing an e-learning model. It is a situation that has brought this upon ourselves. We've got to adjust as human beings, have always done, to meet the current demand. And as a matter of fact, especially in Africa, e-learning is something we need to embrace because eventually we're going to get there. Like I said earlier, the pandemic had actually sped up the process for which we have to adapt to this. What we got from this meeting with the ministry and other national stakeholders is that first of all, we need to start with the bundle. The bundle is that the telecommunications agencies are going to be engaged for them to make it zero net. So every student, wherever you are, if you have to access e-learning platforms, they have to go for free. You are not going to be charged, whether on Zoom, whether on Google platform, wherever it is. That aside, we also want to stem abuse in the sense that what about churches and other businessmen who would want to access the platform and they are not students? Now, the other side is that e-learning does not also mean that you only have to go and be on learning management platforms. There's the aspect of people who would need to do YouTube research and other things. And so each and every student we propose should be given at least a 3.5 gig data bundle for them to use for research purposes only. Aside that, it's not limited because the gadget issues are also very much a challenge. How about students and other things? One of the proposals that we had this morning is for a crash course of 2 weeks. When we are done with this period, when the state is in a position where we can say that, I mean, we've been able to control the spread of the disease and everything has more or less returned to normal. Students are going to be sent back to school. Those who have not been able to make use of the e-learning platform will be given a 2-week crash course so that they catch up with their colleagues going into the final exams. That aside, the incentives that students need is also the need for them to be oriented. Orientation is key to this, but we cannot assume that somebody is in the university is automatically the person supposed to be used to the system. Yes, some of this infrastructure system has been there, but it was incumbent on the institutions to have ensured that their students were very much prepared for the usage of the system. And so we have also put in place measures for every student and institutions to, first of all, train their lecturers on the use of the modules. aside the modules, students must also be taught how to use the system, how to upload data, how to download. I mean, it's as basic as you can think of, but it's not just everybody who is familiar with the system. Familiarity is key to adaptation, and that is what we are called for. The last thing that I want to say about the measures that have been put in place is also the issue of how schools in itself respond to some of challenges faced by students. The need for schools in times like this to have student support services. It appears that by saying that schools, we need to lock down or we need to shut down due to this pandemic, almost everything has gone on. But there was a need for each and every institution to have more or less of a secretariat that is psychologically preparing students towards the challenges that lies ahead. Because it's not just about bringing an e-learning system, it's also ensuring that the students are better psyched for them to attend to. Because schools cannot just set exams because they've taught us. They need to also ensure that we pass and pass well. And so schools have been admonished, as at this morning's meeting, to have an active psychology unit and student support system. So students who have challenges with other things would all be able to, get support from the right quarters. Thank you.
Wonderful, that was great. And thanks for those suggestions. I think we'll get back to the issue of mental health and psychological services, because that's one that I think we are really neglecting in times like this. Even with normal exams, access to all your resources right there on campus with your professors, people still, have panic attacks. People still have so many issues with accessing all the resources they need for exams. And it's a very tough thing for students. So we'll come back to that question. Let's move on now to talk about international students in our various countries. So I think all the countries represented here, basically every country in Africa is a recipient country for international students, right? Cross-border. I know some more than others. Morocco has a very big international student population and a big organization that supports international students who come there on government of Morocco scholarships, as well as other bilateral agreements. In Ghana, Isaac mentioned we have a lot of Nigerian students coming to Ghana for various courses, for medical school, this and that. And then suddenly they find themselves under lockdown. They find themselves with impending exams. They find themselves having to vacate student housing and dormitories. South Africa, it goes without saying, it's one of the biggest receivers of international students, even globally, those doing study abroad, etc. So I would like to hear from all of you. What are some of the challenges that international students are facing right now? What support have they received? Your organizations are the National Union for Ghanaian students, South African students, Moroccan students, right? But what about international students? What kinds of support are you extending to them? Are you partnering with their international student associations within your country? Is the government showing any concern for them? Are you in touch with their embassies? How are they coping, basically, for those who weren't able to make it back home in time, to evade the lockdown? So let's start with Mishek. 1 second, let me unmute.
A lot of measures were put.
Okay, please go ahead.
Yeah, a lot of measures have been put in place this side. I know, for example, University of Johannesburg, about more than 200 international students were kept in their residences. They were not chased out. Everyone else was told to vacate except international students. I know University of Fort Hare with quite a number of international students who are in their particular residences. I know at Wits University, I know at many other institutions generally. So there was an intervention that was made to ensure that they are not forced to vacate if they are not able to leave immediately. Number two, you know very well that the travel ban was initiated. Flights are not allowed to move out or to move in. So some of the international students were accommodated because they were not able to travel immediately back home because there were no flights. But I think one of the key things that were done here is when universities started to engage embassies, various ambassadors of various countries, to ensure that there is intervention provided for international students who might be facing difficulties. And I know a number of embassies were involved, especially at the University of Cape Town. There were a lot of embassies that were involved to provide even transport for students who say they do not have money to go home immediately because that was an emergency, the closure and the lockdown that was provided. So those are some of the interventions that were made. But from our side, we are saying, even that has happened. Part of our biggest fear now is that with the reopening of some of the universities through online platforms, are the students able to access the online platform from the places where they come from? We know very well that there are difficulties that some of the countries might face, which South Africa might not be facing generally, in terms of connectivity and so on and so forth. You know, for example, if the universities are engaging telecommunication providers, MTN, Cell C, Telkom from this side in South Africa, the moment you cross the border to DRC, you find out that this Telkom is no longer working in DRC. Cell C is no longer working in DRC. You will not be able to access these online resources or these platforms that have been created at zero rated. Therefore, that is our greatest fear currently, that the international students who left for their homes might then not be able to access for their studies. But also part of our fear is that those who left as well to their respective countries might not be able to come back to their institutions, because remember the lockdown says people are not supposed to travel back to countries. These travel restrictions are very clear that when you are out, you cannot come in. When you are in, you cannot go out currently. You remain where you are. So what will happen then in the process? So we are saying those are some of the fears we are having. But what I know is that there are no international students who are in the streets, who got stranded. We intervened. Our universities intervened for them, and some were able to travel home. Some are still staying in our residences. I can tell you.
You know how many?
We have got
how many may be there?
Approximately 900 students are still in our respective residences.
Okay,
currently.
That is countrywide for the whole of South Africa.
Yeah, for the whole countrywide.
900, okay.
900.
Okay, that's interesting. Anyway, thank you for this perspective. So let's rush through all the different regions or countries represented here. So let's go back to Sophia.
Yeah.
So just a quick minute, if you can tell us how international students are coping, what supports they have at this moment.
Yes. Concerning the situation of international students, more than 20,000 international students are enrolled in various higher education institutions in Morocco this year. Nearly 17,000 students are African, with more than 10,000 scholarship students. Mm-hmm. Obviously, this virus and its challenges affect all populations, regardless of nationality, economic, or social education, or education level. Morocco is committed to guarantee international students the same level of care, benefits, and services dedicated to Moroccan citizens, whether they are medical, social, or economic. In this regard, foreign students, especially African students who reside in university residences, are sponsored, fully sponsored. And food baskets and hygiene packs with soap, bleach, hydroalcoholic solutions are regularly delivered to them. An awareness campaign to sensitize the students has also been organized by the IMCE, the Moroccan Agency for International Cooperation. And the civil society is also organizing to help those in need, such as students. Despite the great efforts made so far, foreign students, since this is our subject here, still faces some challenges. Indeed, concerning self-funded students and who don't reside in boarding schools or in university residences, the question is about the payment of their rent, the location, or their apartment. Because some of them used to have part-time jobs, which today are no more possible, and the aid from the Solidarity Special Fund granted to employees may not be enough to meet their needs. And maybe that their parents are no longer able to transfer money to them. So this question of paying rent remains, I think, really crucial. I also wanted to draw attention to the situation of students who stayed in Morocco because they are waiting for their master's or PhD thesis defense. The situation is likely to last a long time. So we'll have to find a solution by then so they can pass their defenses on time. And concerning Moroccan students abroad, the government and embassies organized repatriation flights at the beginning of the pandemic for those who wanted to come back to Morocco. But since the borders are closed, there's no move, right? So this is it.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for that. And it's actually a really grave concern, you know. I was also thinking about the fact that some students on our campuses, whether international or local, were dependent on part-time jobs, TA-ships, etc., and may have lost that, you know. So what kind of safety net do they have now for their daily survival, basically? Some may have been sending money back home, back to family in rural areas and all that. There's so much to consider, you know, in how to remedy all the different impacts that have come with this situation. So thank you for that, Sophia. Let's hear from Isaac.
Right. Thank you very much. On the issue of international students, in my first submission, I had said that international students for us, even as National Union of Ghana students, is very much a concern for us because their problem is not limited to the challenges that they face here, but the fact that given the situation, they may not even be able to get help from their home countries because parents are under lockdown, they are not working, they may not even be able to move to even extend support to them. But as much as possible, we're seeing how best we could extend support to them. As part of our petition to government, as of yesterday, for which reason we had a meeting this morning, it was a recommendation for the government to also support international students. The fortunate thing is that compared to Ghanaians who were asked to go home or move to their various places of abode as households, international students were left in their hostels. It makes it easy for them to be assessed. And so we have a relief scheme for the less privileged and other, you know, deprived communities. And for that matter, on a number of occasions, food has been extended to international. It is not enough. On our food bank scheme, for instance, we also have a call line where students are calling each and every day for support. A number of them have been international students. And so it can only get better. As it stands now, one of the things that we've also learned from this is the need for us to keep data. Because, for instance, we engage the international students, some of the international students, and there's no point of contact. You are not able to even identify their location as to where they are within the communities. And I think that some of the things we've learned from this is for us to keep relevant data for some of these things. And so moving forward, we'll plead for more support for international students. And I think that All Africa Students All Africa Students Union once again has led the way. Beyond putting us together, they've been first as responding to the issues of African students in China. I mean, sending us, and it gives us a glimmer of hope that at least there's a union that is concerned about the state of African and African students in general across the world. Yeah. And so it's also not limited to Ghana as a whole. Yeah. I think that we need to connect to our various country representatives. If I have a student in Morocco, I'm expecting that if I should contact my sister Sophia should be able to take care of my students there, whereas I equally take care of Moroccan students in Ghana. And it's equally not a matter of reciprocity. It's just a matter of humanity. It is a responsibility on us all for us to work.
Okay. All right, let's move on to Claude. Claude, can you give us the situation with international students in your country?
Hello, thank you. La situation des étudiants non gabonais dans notre pays est la même que celle des étudiants de nationalité gabonaise, parce que ce sont les mêmes défis qui sont rencontrés ici. L'accès à l'éducation au Gabon est ouvert à tous à la même enseigne. Pour avoir l'autre facette de la question, c'est celle des étudiants internationaux gabonais vivant à l'extérieur. Alors, c'est un vrai défi pour eux parce que pour la plupart, ils sont des étudiants boursiers, donc Donc, c'est l'État qui paye leurs études. Le gouvernement gabonais, pour seulement parler de ce pays, le gouvernement gabonais a mis en place une plateforme e-bourse pour traiter tout ce qui est comme question de bourse pour les étudiants vivant à l'extérieur. Seulement, la difficulté reste justement celle de la constance du service, parce que des services sont mis en place, mais derrière, il n'y a pas un suivi. Ce qui fait que l'impact, au final, n'est pas celle que l'on souhaiterait. Il y a beaucoup de plaintes. Et une fois de plus, les jeunes se sont mis au centre pour aider les apprenants vivant à l'extérieur pour qu'ils puissent avoir accès à sur les tutoriels, comment avoir accès à cette plateforme de e-bourse. Ça, c'est pour la session du Gabon. Mais pour les autres pays de l'Afrique centrale, ça reste parce que le Gabon est l'un des rares pays d'Afrique à encore avoir des étudiants qui ont une bourse de l'État. Pour les autres étudiants du reste de l'Afrique centrale, c'est difficile parce qu'ils vivent dans ces conditions-là, seuls, loin de leur maison. Et on croise des doigts que les mesures qui sont prises dans ces différentes parties du monde leur soient bénéfiques. Là, j'ai à l'esprit la situation de tous les étudiants et des jeunes en Chine, eu égard à ce que les informations nous révèlent. C'est bel et bien pour dire que nos étudiants internationaux aujourd'hui ne sont pas totalement en sécurité, parce que dans ce type de circonstances, on mieux vaut être chez soi qu'ailleurs. Donc, oui, il faut également que les gouvernements africains réfléchissent à comment mettre en place des solutions adaptées à ce public-là, qui, même loin du continent, restent les enfants du continent et qui, également, la même enseigne que ceux qui vivent en Afrique doivent avoir accès à toutes les facilités utiles. Yes, the situation of the international student here in Gabon are very stopful, but the government also take initiative to put e-burst for them to help them to have access for resources coming from Gabon. But there is not the whole situation, because they live in different countries where there is not the home country, so they face a lot of challenges. We need to be taken in consideration in the solution put together by the government.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks for sharing that, Claude Marie from Gabon. So I'm going to read a comment from Vivienne from Seychelles. So e-learning has been set up for students, both primary and secondary students. Internet has been made available for all students. Teachers are also on WhatsApp and other means to provide students with their schoolwork. Prior to establishing online learning on Ministry of Education website, teachers were asked to prepare worksheets for students to work on. So what I don't know is whether these were possibly distributed physically before lockdown. Because I think before lockdown, most institutions were forewarned that, you know, in X number of days, the government is going to announce this. I think some governments were also quieter about it because they didn't want to create the panic that comes with lockdown, you know, rushing to buy stuff, rationing items in supermarkets, and you know, all the subtle chaos that may attend, you know, some of these announcements. So that's a perspective from Seychelles. Thank you, Vivienne. I think we'll take two more questions. The next one is really critical. And then the last one will be more on, you know, a way forward. What is the world going to look like after this pandemic? What is education going to look like after this pandemic? We've had to skip a lot because we're running out of time. So let's take this this issue of mental health. It's something that we're not talking about very much, because we know that in some of our parts of the world, it's you know, it's not an issue. It's seen as like a foreign problem, right? Mental health. Why do you talk about mental health at home? How do you say that you're facing mental health issues and so you're not productive at work, or you are struggling to do your work? But indeed, it's something that, you know, the very best of students, you know, still go through, professors go through it, all that. In your various countries, are there, you know, responses that are dealing with the mental health of students, of professors as well, of different education providers, even for parents who have to juggle working from home with ensuring that their students, I guess mostly of below university age, are coping with the demands of online learning? How has that been? And this question is from Merlin Ulysse. And thank you for that question, Merlin. It's very, important for us to consider that. And with this same question of mental health, it has been reported that some international students have been targeted in our various countries. So some have been mistreated, have been subjected to medical exams just because they are international. They would be amongst like the few to be sampled for testing. And I don't know whether it makes sense or not. It reeks of a lot of bias, which is unneeded and is going to push them into an even worse abyss of mental health issues. Having having had to face the issue of being away from home and not going back, and also juggling academic demands. Apparently, some have been threatened with revocation of visas, detention and deportation. I'm still hearing more about this, but then these are reports coming in so far. Do you have any comments on that? So mental health and unfair treatment of international students, first of all, and generally mental health of the whole population, especially those involved in the educational sector. So parents, education suppliers, and students who are on the demand side of education. Let's start with Isaac, please.
Right. Thank you very much. You realize that when the COVID situation started in Wuhan, China, the National Union of Ghana students, together with this partner chapter in China, were once again very proactive in this. And I'll commend my International Relations Secretary for having spearheaded this particular project, where we extended support to our students in China. That was because there had been more or less like a binary argument as to whether the students should be repatriated to Ghana or not. But the issue is that at that point in time, it was not whether or not the students should be brought into the country. It was about our preparedness to contain any aftermath of somebody coming in with, the disease. But given that we couldn't do that around the time, the best we could do was to extend support to our colleagues out there. Now, each and every student who were within the log zone were given the support of $500 each. And around that time, we had about 340 students within that particular province. Apart from the money extended to them, we needed to also psychologically prepare them. We needed to send them food from Ghana to at least let them feel that, they're home. Aside that, a Weibo platform was created by the government of Ghana, where we have representatives of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we have the student leadership, and of course, every student within the province, together with psychologists in Ghana who are online with the students. Direct access to these psychologists where students could engage them at every point in time. That was the support we could extend to our people. Down here in Ghana, we don't have any particular one for international students. But what we have in place is that we have various short course systems where students or individuals who need help can actually call for support. Beyond the food support and other things, for the psychological aspect, you could call some of these numbers and have a conversation with someone. 2 days ago, the government of Ghana, designed and issued out, an application for tracking COVID cases, where people go online and provide data for them to be able to track down people who have the disease. But aside the COVID in particular, where the app says, you could also call the hotline on this particular app, where you have somebody to talk to. Whatever be the case, there's somebody who grants you a listening ear. Irrespective of all the things that I've said, there's still a lot of things for us to do for our international students. We need to give them a representation. We need to give them a voice. And I always say this, that NANS Ghana, the Nigerian Students Chapter in Ghana, has been very proactive. They've been very supportive. I've seen them mobilizing resources to extend support to Nigerian students in the country. It does not only limit itself to Nigerians. I think we need to also look at the other international students. We need to see how best we support each other. And I've said earlier, we Ghanaians here will support our international students, and we would expect same to be done to every Ghanaian out there. The rationale here is that it is not about reciprocity. It's just purely a matter of humanity, the fact that we are each other's keeper. As to what is happening in China and what we have to do as a body or as a union, the All Africa Students Union had reaching to the various Chinese embassies within the African countries. And we need to follow this up to the latter. It does not also stop with leadership. Our people need to rally behind us. Let us use all the various handles of social media and societal pressure that can hold people responsible for how they treat our students out there. Thank you.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much. So let's hear just, 30 seconds each from everyone. So let's go to Claude Marie.
Ok. Alors, en 30 secondes, que dire? Alors, la situation, la pandémie du coronavirus, a surpris le monde entier. L'Afrique n'en est pas en reste. Et c'est une pandémie qui vient simplement mettre en exergue toutes les difficultés que l'Afrique connaît déjà. Donc, celle de l'accès à une éducation de qualité, de l'accès aux sources d'énergie, de l'accès à Internet, qui reste de vrais défis et auxquels on devrait, au-delà de la pandémie, on devrait véritablement y réfléchir pour apporter des solutions idoines. Et l'heure est effectivement à faire des propositions et l'idée ici, c'est vraiment que tous les pays africains mettent à contribution toutes les énergies, toutes les forces libres de l'Afrique pour trouver une solution. La solution ne viendra pas uniquement du gouvernement. Je suis convaincue que c'est la somme de toutes nos petites initiatives qui fera toute la différence. Donc, oui, il faut que tout le monde contribue à apporter cette solution-là et le gouvernement devrait être plus ouvert pour véritablement permettre que nous endiguions ensemble cette situation. Yes, the coronavirus pandemic has come to highlight the difficulty Africa challenge each day. And yes, it's not just about education, but it's about energy, social resources, all that stuff. And in the world of finding solution of against coronavirus, we need to put our energy together to really find a good solution, a definitive solution for this pandemic. And yes, we need us. We as youth and students, we are the intelligence of Africa, and there is a time to really put our knowledge to the service of the continent. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. So Anne, can you tell us what are some of the mental health challenges that people are facing? Are there any initiatives by the government, by the education sector to address these, especially for international students? What is their experience and how are the challenges being addressed? Especially pertaining to mental health for both international.
Me or who is Anne?
This is Anne, please.
Okay. Oh.
Okay, so in Kenya, we did see a panic when the first case was announced, whereby when you'd go to the supermarkets, you would find there were no goods. That showed that the mental health of Kenyans was completely disrupted. So one of the things that the government did try to do was just keep on telling people to be calm. They kept on updating us of the situation, asking us to remain indoors, follow the guidelines that they had given, wash your hands, sanitize. They warned against the people who sell products from inflating the amounts to crazy amounts, because you would find an item that would maybe be 100 shillings was now 3,000 shillings. And that was also something that was really affecting parents and students, because if your parents cannot afford food, then definitely you cannot be able to learn or to continue with the online learning. So those are some of the things that I think the government tried to do. A few weeks back, the president announced that they would give 100 million Kenya shillings to entertainers, to actors, musicians, and all those people, so that they can continue entertaining the country, so that the country can keep sane. So I think that is one of the ways that the government has tried to ensure that the country is sane, because now movies are being released every single day because everyone wants a chunk of that money. I would say one of the things that they should have done is, just like there is a toll-free line that if you think you have corona, you call that number. They should also have a toll-free line where if you are facing challenges with your mental health, you feel like maybe the world is coming to an end.
We don't have that yet, right?
We do not have that yet in Kenya. So there should be a toll-free line where you get to speak to counselors and they bring you back to sanity if there are people who are facing mental health challenges.
Let me cross-check something with Isaac. Isaac, so the toll-free line in Ghana, is that the same line for requesting tests if you had symptoms, or is there a separate line for reporting mental health and for
if you have symptoms, the code you use is the 112. If you need to talk to somebody, I mean, whatever. Of course, if you even connect to that line, they could support you. But if you dial the 113, you will have support to talk to somebody, whatever the situation is. I mean, a number of the TV stations are also running a lot of adverts and advisory notes for even people who have had this disease, for them not to be stigmatized. Because the challenge is that the more you stigmatize people, the more people are called and will not want to share their problems or report the conditions that they have.
Okay, great. That's encouraging, and I agree with you, Anne, that there should be a dedicated line for that. You know, as the testing lines may also be overwhelmed by calls coming from people with various mental health situations. So thank you for sharing your experience in Kenya. So let's hear from Sophia now, and then Meshach.
So here in Morocco, a hotline has been set up for people who do not feel good or who have questions or anxieties or fears. But it is a hotline open to all. It's not specific to students. And to my knowledge, no psychological crisis unit has been set up by universities or by students. So it's not specific to students, but to all citizens.
Okay. All right. And then Meshach?
Can you unmute me?
Yes, I've unmuted you. Go ahead, please.
Okay. Look, the issues of mental health affect every student, whether you are international or you are local student. It affects even academics.
Exactly.
But I want to just give you categories of students. International students, of course, the thinking that whether your visa is expiring, is it going to be renewed? Am I going to be able to finish my studies in another country? It's a nightmare. I think that all African Students Union must write a letter to all presidents in Africa that they need to be flexible and extend visas probably by a year, considering the impact of coronavirus. I think all African Students Union can write that kind of a letter to all heads of state. But I think that if you look at first-year students, if you're a first-year student and we're trying to, especially the academic calendar this side of Southern Africa, where we're just starting, there is a subject called computers or something that teaches you how to navigate through computers. Teaches you communication skills and so on. It's a first-year subject in most of the courses. New students were still beginning to learn that subject. So they are not yet vexed in terms of how to use laptops, computers, and so on and so forth, internet resources. So the fact that we're migrating to online learning will affect mainly first years the most than most of the students, because they were coming from these deep rural high schools, primary schools, high schools, and they are starting to enter university. Universities are elitist by nature. They're ivory towers that when you enter, you need to be oriented thoroughly on some of the things. You know, all of you were first years at some point. And you know, most of the things we learn them on our first years, how to send an assignment online, how to go and look for some sources online and so on. So first years will be hit hard. But number two, final year students are affect their mental health is deteriorating because they are thinking a lot about whether the fact that I was supposed to write my exams in June and finish my qualification. I was supposed to write my exams this year and I was supposed to finish off this degree this year. You know, the fact that we have final year and we are not sure whether this academic year will proceed or not, it's a difficult matter, which leads to mental health, which leads to depression, which leads to anxiety. And lastly, the issue of unfunded students, students who do not have funding, because here we've got a big funding called the National Students Financial Aid Scheme. NSFAS is funding 700,000 students. But we also do have other students, about 600,000 students who are unfunded, who are missing middle students who do not qualify for NSFAS. And those who are on NSFAS are still receiving their allowances even though they are at home. But the unfunded students are still facing difficulties even at home because of these challenges of coronavirus. Therefore, their mental health is affected in the process. So I want to urge all African Union that whilst we are doing efforts to assist these students in our respective countries and use our organizations, we think that the treatment of international students in China and in other European countries is unfair, and all African Union, I saw the letter they have written, they must continue to stand firm, and we must all continue to stand firm to ensure that we stand for fellow Africans who are being ill-treated in China, who are being ill-treated in other European countries, so that they are not dehumanized and ill-treated because of this coronavirus. It's a virus that came without our own knowledge, and we don't have to suffer because of that. So we need to be able to stand for our fellow Africans.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. So unfortunately, we've run out of time, and I'm going to combine two questions into one, and you answer that as your closing remarks, okay, in just 1 minute. So if we can all go through that, and then afterwards, Dr. Kiwi will come on to give us, just final remarks, like in just a quick minute. So just in summation, unfortunately, one aspect that I really wanted us to get to was, we've mentioned all these problems. Of course, there have been different measures that were taken, really impressive ones. Mental health lines, students, supporting the government with supporting vulnerable communities, international students, etc. But then there's so many challenges that still remain. These challenges are not just for the pandemic, because had these challenges been addressed beforehand, then I think the transition to online learning, to coping during this pandemic would be easier. We've mentioned electricity, we've mentioned hardware problems, we've mentioned universal access to the internet, we've mentioned professors not familiar with e-learning platforms, we've mentioned poverty and welfare for students and their families, we've mentioned nutrition and general financial shortfalls, we've mentioned the timeline needed for students to adjust. For example, Mishek mentioned that students who are coming from deep townships, there's an orientation program which teaches them computer skills in the first year, and they're in the middle of that, and then suddenly they have to jump onto online platforms. We've also mentioned psychological stress and problems, and the fact that a lot of schools do not even have counseling services available. Now, just spare a thought for this. If you go through this list, any proper, well-functioning educational system, any thoroughly functional country, any equitable country, at least equitable as much as possible, should have all these in place throughout the whole country. And I'm sure you agree with that. Electricity, access to hardware, access to internet, professors not familiar with e-learning. It has taken this pandemic for us to realize that all these things must have been put in place before. Right now, the solutions we've given, though impressive, even though it seems like we may be ahead in our handling of the situation compared to some Western countries that we unfortunately like to peg our standards on, we realize that some of this infrastructure, if they existed before, would mean that we would have to think less about pinprick mitigation interventions at this moment. And so moving forward, what is the right thing to do? Are we waiting for another pandemic? How do we ensure that we have all these things in place, both hard, soft skills, various resources and infrastructure, financial help and welfare for students from all walks of life? How do we ensure that all these things are in place? If you were to do something about it, in a single line, what do you think is is our way of, remedying these things so that next time anything happens, God forbid anything happens again, but next time we're faced with any problem, how do we ensure that we're in a better place to handle all this, especially within the educational sector? That's the first question. And then the last thing is, do you think that we are going to move to an age of right to internet, right? We have a right to education. Some countries have passed right to information bills. We have right to life, right to this, right to that. Have we finally moved into an era where a right to internet is going to be counted amongst the basic rights of people, especially considering that at every point in your life, you are typically either working or schooling, and both activities heavily depend on access to internet. Is this something that's going to be, a big movement after this pandemic dies down? So let's take our closing remarks with these two questions in mind. And we'll start from you, Mishek.
Yeah, so I know as a moderator, I think that I have two questions for you as well.
Okay.
That I would want you to answer before we close this session.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, then I will go to my closing remarks.
Okay, let's do this.
Yeah, the cost structure of universities, do you think that is supposed to change considering that distance learning or online learning differs from contact learning? That is the first one. And the second one is the fact that students were told to vacate their residences. Do you think that is it possible for those students to be refunded, or the money is diverted to pay for other online resources that students might be needing? So those are the questions for you, because I think that it would be unfair that you ask me and I don't ask you something.
It's fine. I mean, that's
that. But for purposes of dealing this matter, I wanted to ask you to make you consider if this pandemic had started in Africa. Just think about it. If it had started in Africa, if it did not start in Europe or China, and it started here in Africa, I think that, I don't know what you think, but I think that our African leaders were going to take their families to Europe. They were going to run away and seek medical interventions in European countries and leave us in trouble. But because it started in Europe and China, this is an opportunity, an eye-opener for all of us, that we must look for homegrown solutions. We must look for African solutions to our problems. We must find a way to resolve issues that we face as Africa using our own scientists, our own laboratories, and our own medical resources, and many other resources. There are countries, for example, that did not even have ventilators. Just imagine, just one ventilator it was difficult to find it in hospitals, because whenever our leaders get sick, they take a next flight, they go and look for medical intervention in European countries instead of Africa. So that is we need to think about it, to say, how do we have our own African solution to our African problems? But I think because of this pandemic, of course, there are three scenarios that we must know. The first scenario is that things might normalize, this virus might go and will normalize and come back to normality. That is the best case scenario. The second case scenario is that the status quo might remain where infections are happening, but at a slow rate in Africa. Then the last scenario is the worst case scenario, where people will start to die like in Europe. It has not happened yet in Africa. People are still, the numbers are still small compared to other parts of the world. And if things go to be worse, to the worst case scenario, then it means we have different solutions than the first case scenario, where things will be normal. So I think that going forward, we need to have a number of things that we need to do. We need to either reconfigure the academic calendar, or we open after the lockdown, or adopt the online system with various conditions that students must have online resources. We need to think about digital infrastructure development. It's a critical issue for our African continent, because without proper ICT infrastructure, we will not be able to implement fairly these ideas that we need to have about online learning or migration from contact to online learning. But there are good things that has been done here in South Africa. Our universities started to produce masks. They started to produce ventilators. They started to produce sanitizers, which is a good thing. But why were they not producing all these things?
Oh, yes.
It means that coronavirus has assisted to show us. Some of the vice chancellors even took 33% of their income to contribute to coronavirus solidarity fund. It means that this crisis has created an opportunity for new and meaningful interventions to assist this situation. So what becomes the way forward, my brother? Just to encourage our leaders, our student leaders who are listening. Let us abide by the regulations. Let us not break regulations. Regulations such as social distancing, because some students, when they listen to us as their leaders, they tend to listen. So regulations must be abided by. Don't shake hands, wash your hands all the time. It's important. Number two, solidarity of Africa is important. Cases are still low in Africa compared to other parts of the world. 18,000, lower than Italy alone. How do we build on that? We need solidarity as Africa to ensure that we work together to find a meaningful solution for this virus. Whilst they are running trials in China or in the USA, we must be running our own trials in Africa for medication, for vaccines, so that we can be able to show that we are able to come up with a solution. So we need solidarity. But lastly, my leader, I think that we need to encourage all our leaders not to politicize this coronavirus pandemic. Because the moment we politicize it, we run the risk of not coming up with proper interventions that will assist us to save lives, to help our people, and to ensure that this pandemic do not spread the way it's spreading in other parts of the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mishek. And to answer your questions, I mean, briefly, I'll say that there should be very strong considerations for, you know, like prorating fees that have already been paid, because there are a lot of people who will feel cheated by this, but it has to be done within reason. You know, don't forget that there are a lot of losses being counted all around. Government is trying to figure out how to create welfare, bigger safety nets for students and the general population who've been affected by this. Universities are conjuring resources to start making masks and ventilators, all that. And so there should really be a balanced argument about this. And of course, like there's a tendency that people will feel cheated. And it's a conversation that must be had. I cannot give an a clear answer right now, but I'm leaning towards, some kind of, some kind of support for students that will be meaningful to them financially as well. Okay, so let's move on. Please, let's make this 30 seconds, max 1 minute each. So Claude Marie, your closing remarks, please.
Ok. Comme mot de conclusion, je pense que cette pandémie, pas que je pense, mais cette pandémie vient mettre à l'évidence la nécessité de véritablement jouer le rôle de la décentralisation. Gérer, c'est prévenir et prévenir. Gérer, c'est prévenir et prévenir, c'est anticiper. Jusqu'ici, malheureusement, cette pandémie nous montre que nos États sont certes gérés au plus grand niveau, mais il n'y a pas une vraie gestion qui a à l'esprit un impact communautaire, un impact communautaire. Et j'aimerais ici, c'est le lieu de dire ici que la décentralisation que l'on, pour les pays d'Afrique centrale en particulier, est une urgence désormais parce que chaque municipalité devrait avoir un plan d'urgence pour répondre à ce type de pandémie ou de difficultés. On devrait avoir des plans d'urgence. Ça montre à suffisance que l'heure est venue de véritablement déconcentrer le pouvoir exécutif pour qu'il y ait une réponse efficace aux besoins des populations. Et ici, pour parler de la situation des étudiants, les universités devraient avoir des plans d'urgence en cas de l'impossibilité de fonctionner normalement. Qu'est-ce qu'on proposerait aux apprenants? Aujourd'hui, il n'y a pas de solution idoine, c'est parce qu'on n'y a pas pensé. Et je suis convaincue que on ne peut pas gérer un État, on ne peut pas gérer des États comme si à l'aveuglette. Il faut des plans d'urgence, il faut des plans de prévention en cas de nécessité. Et ça montre en fait, et c'est comme le disait mon prédécesseur, il ne faut pas que cette pandémie soit politisée. C'est vraiment le lieu de se remettre en question et de réfléchir à véritablement trouver des solutions pour le bien des populations. Et pour le deuxième point, Internet est désormais un droit, au même titre que l'éducation. L'accès à Internet est un droit désormais. Parce que c'est le lieu où il y a plusieurs informations qui ne passent qu'au travers d'Internet, ou avant que ce ne soit accessible sur le plan physique, donc au travers de journaux ou sur le plan, ou même à la télévision. Internet est un moyen de communication, et la communication est un droit. L'information est un droit, le droit à l'information. Donc, Internet aujourd'hui est une nécessité, et il faut véritablement que l'on réfléchisse à rendre l'accès à Internet à toutes les populations, au même titre que l'éducation.
Okay.
For the closing act, especially for the Central of Africa, this pandemic comes to show us the difficulty to manage our continent and each country at the executive level, at the governmental level. We need actually to let every community really manage themselves. I think about the decentralization. We are really challenged here in Central of Africa. Each municipality have to plan on an emergency plan for each situation, because there is about people life. It's not about joking or politics. And I'm according with my predecessor about the political, the government of Africa don't have to politicize this pandemic. Is a really the path to really to reflect about the real solution at the background. And internet today is a human right, because information is a human right. So access to the internet, access to hard data is a human right today, and we really have to challenge it as children, because a lot of knowledge is available in internet, and we need to have access to him to be comparative to our fellow of older continent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Claude Marie. So 30 seconds each, Anne, and then Jay, and then we finish with Sophia.
Okay, I think it should be a right that we should have internet, and internet accessibility should be a right, because we are going into an era where everything will be online. Every activity that a person wants to do would be done online. And for us to open up Africa and get Africa to be competing with other continents, if other continents are having internet and internet has become like a basic thing to them, then why should we as Africans say that internet should not be a right? So I do support that internet, accessibility of internet should be a right in Africa, but this is something that will be realized over a long period of time, and it should not come and disrupt other things that were already in progress. I'd like to say that in conclusion, that we as the youth and we as young people in our society right now are the ones who can come up and help our countries fight this thing that is coronavirus. We can see, like, for example, in Kenya, we have universities manufacturing ventilators, up to 50 ventilators a week. We have the University of Nairobi, which has come up with an equipment called the COBA 6800 that can test up to 3,000 samples of coronavirus per day. This will enable our country to now be able to do mass testing. So it is only when we, the youth, use what we have that we will be able to help our countries manage and beat this thing that is coronavirus.
Wonderful. Thank you, Anne. Thank you for sharing those perspectives as well. And then Jay?
Right. Thank you very much. How I wish this meeting will never come to an end. I've learned a lot from my colleagues.
We'll have to stop talking and go and act, right?
Who's participated in this? But my final words, I think that yes, we've exhausted a number of the issues. But realistically, I think I would also admonish each and every one of us, all students and persons who are watching this particular engagement, to also have a sense of responsibility on our part. I'll cite an example. The United States today has withdrawn its commitment to the World Health Organization, amount of about $400 million. apart from the United States, you have the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation being their contribution to the World Health. You have Germany and the UK contributing similarly. But there's no mention of African countries coming together to contribute towards research and development on our continent. Our reliance on the West and other third-party organizations is not helping us in our development agenda. Malaria has plagued us for God knows how long, yet still we have not found a way of dealing with some of these problems. It's high time we as young persons realize that yes, we are young today, but we shall be the leaders of our continent tomorrow. Those in power today were once like us. They probably complained and bemoaned and said all the things that we are saying today. The difference between them and us is the change we are able to make tomorrow. So yes, we shall continue fighting, we shall continue asking for the relevant things to be done, but there's also a duty on our part to be a bit more responsible, to be a bit more conscious towards ourselves. There's a need for us to also advocate while we keep pushing for some of these things, to develop homegrown talent, to invest in research, to invest in our education and develop our continent. It's also incumbent on us, whilst our members are very ready to always come to us and demand responsibility on our part as leadership. There's also the need for us to ensure that we make our commitments to the various organizations for them to be able to meet up the support that they need from us. I, as a union president, my members in Ghana are expecting that in times like the National Union of Ghana students will stand up to the task, will stand up to their demands and support them in times that they need. We are also in effect expecting that the All Africa Students Union will also support each and every African student. But the problem is that beyond the human capacity, the need for resources for them to be able to achieve some of these things, there's the need for us as student union leaders for us to also contribute to the cause of our development. We cannot always expect results without contributing or planning to that effect. And so leaders, while we speak to this, we shall commend you, but as much as well, let's also be a bit more responsible by ensuring we channel the needed resources to achieve the results that we want. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And to finish off, we have Sophia, and then we'll go to Dr. Kiwi.
So my final word is that we have to respect the instructions of the authorities in order to protect ourselves and our beloved, and be responsible. Solidarity here is the key word more than ever. We all know that the pandemic will probably last a long time, and the social and economic consequences will be huge. This pandemic has highlighted all the challenges we were facing before, but which were set aside. So we have to maintain our efforts as long as possible. And once all this will be done, we have to remember all these challenges, learn lessons, and draw the necessary conclusions. The battle will be tough, the battle will be long, but we will all together get over it. And thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sophia. So Sophia's last point is so important, that we need to maintain ethos as much as possible. Solidarity is the key word more than ever. We have to respect authorities to control the pandemic and also start thinking ahead to how we're going to mitigate the economic and social effects that this pandemic has caused. And all of us have mentioned here that it is really up to us students and youth to doing these solutions indefatigably. And I trust that, you know, we'll do that and hopefully we get the support that we need. We talk about these things a lot, and from here, you know, from here we have to decide what is the action plan moving forward. So let's hand over to Dr. Kiwi for some final remarks, and then I'll close the meeting. I'll share something and then close the meeting. Dr. Kiwi, thank you.
Thanks, moderator. I hope I have 30 seconds like the others. It was quite a long 30 seconds.
1 minute, don't worry.
No, it's okay. I'm just joking. Look, maybe to summarize, as students and as researchers, we are two things at the same time. We're human and we're intellectuals. Mm-hmm. Our human nature draws on our activism, and through activism, there are many things that we can do. That's got to do with not deepening the digital divide, making sure the disadvantaged have what they need. Mm-hmm. But that's an activist route, a civil society route. As researchers and as intellectuals, there's another route, and as students that we need to be mindful of and look at. And a couple of interesting things came through on that second route today. And in the short term, things that I'm hearing, like the key thing there would be the credibility of qualifications. Mm-hmm. Mishak said that a couple of times. Mm-hmm. So as we go into this next period, how can we ensure that your qualifications that will be awarded in 2020 and in 2021 will remain credible? Awarded in Africa or awarded in Europe or in the US. And there are a couple of things that came to mind there. Curriculum trimming is something that we're looking at in South Africa at the moment. How do you, through a consolidated agreed process, trim the curriculum and retain the credibility? How do we look at assessment? Can assessments, exams be restructured so that the qualification can remain credible? And then maybe pushing a little bit further is how agile can we be with credentialing? This is more medium to long term. Because credentialing is something that we're all aware of in Africa, and how do we do that in a more agile manner? There's something that the African Union Commission is running right now. It's called the African Continental Qualifications Framework. It's a 5-year initiative to get comparability across African countries on their qualifications and to allow more flexibility and more agility. This is the time not only to think short term, but also long term. And some of the long term things have already started. What we can do now is accelerate them. So to go back to Papa Kodjo, to go back to your 2 points that you raised around system and around rights, I think on the system level, there's no quick fixes. We can't fix a 100-year problem in a week, but there are some activist kind of things that we can do now that can relieve pressure and help people. But let's think medium to long term, how we can accelerate good things that are already happening. On the rights front, yeah, it's all about human rights, but and about access and internet and so on. How about the right to data privacy? Don't forget about it. Data privacy is important, and we can easily just surrender that right in this period and never get it back again. So thank you so much for the opportunity, Samuel, Papa Kodjo. I've been listening in. This has been an incredibly interesting experience. I hope I've added a bit of value. I'm happy to follow you going forward. You're doing good work, and thank you for that.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Kiwi, for those poignant reminders, and also for speaking to some of the suggestions that we've made, that we're looking at fixing systems and then also how to advance rights to internet, but also to data protection, which we are giving away at this moment in order to find solutions to this problem. So with all this in mind, I hope that we'll be able to move on from here and continue taking action, needed action to remedy this, not for this moment, but for times and times ahead, so that we won't always be found ourselves chasing solutions whenever a problem arises. So thank you all. So just by introduction, again, my name is Papa Kodjo. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Oxford in Comparative International Education, and it's been a pleasure moderating this conversation. Thank you all for being here. If you look on your screen now, ASU has a whole webinar series. I believe this is weekly. So ours is the first one, Education in Emergencies. And then next week, 24th April, we have Impact of COVID-19 on Women and Vulnerable Groups, What Should Drive Policy Making. And then we have Studying Outside Your Home Country, Food Insecurity, E-Learning and Open Educational Resources, Management of the Pandemic, Implications for Human Rights and Good Governance, one on skills, one on reconfiguration of education and what the pandemic has taught us. And the final one is Africa's place in world politics. What can this generation do differently to make Africa truly competitive on the international stage? I would dare say to make Africa, the pioneer of many good solutions to international problems. So thank you all for joining us. It's been a pleasure. We hope you enjoyed this conversation as well. And please keep the questions coming in. ASU will publish a report from this discussion, and hopefully you can keep commenting and offering your support. Do go on to Jet Education's website, look at the good work they're doing, and look at how you can also be of support. Thank you all once again.